Chapter 24:13. A glimpse of his true feelings. Gu Shijie could clearly smell his scent and feel the strength of his well-built body. She breathed hastily under his hot breath. Di Fui held her tightly in his arms, so close that their bodies were basically merged into one. Perhaps it was the last time that the two of them would be separated. They were like two soul mates who had to go through many obstacles to be reunited with each other again. Now that they had finally found one another, they would not let anything get in their way. They were clinging on to one another physically, showering each other with kisses and endless affection. No amount of intimacy was enough for them to express their deeply rooted love for one another. Both of them were naked, and Di Fui traced every part of her body and kissed every inch from her lips to her little finger. She was overwhelmed by how affectionate Di Fui was to her. The man no longer wanted to hold back his desire for her. However, he also knew that this was only her second time having sex. It had been a while since their first night together, so even if he was desperate, he did not want to risk hurting her, for fear that she might dislike the experience and push him away in the future. Therefore, he tried to control himself and went at a slower pace than what he wanted. He tried to satisfy her needs in every way possible, so that she would surrender herself willingly to him. Indeed, his efforts paid off, as it was a very pleasurable experience for her. Everywhere his fingers glided over gave her such an irresistible sensation. Gu Shijie was surprised her how slowly he took things in bed. She knew how hard it was for him to control his desire, as she had expected him to go all out. But to her surprise, he did not skip the foreplay that preceded intercourse. He really did care about her. His loving gesture touched her. She wrapped her arms around his waist as she planted a gentle kiss on his lips. "You. Hurry up. I am ready." Astonished, Di Fui whispered into her ear. "Do you want me now?" Gu Shijie could already feel the eagerness that took over all of her senses. She gave him another kiss on his chin and answered frankly, "Yes." Di Fui's eyes darkened, for he was ready to unleash his desires for her. "Baby, your honesty is what I admire the most." He then began his quest. Both of them had experienced the sensation before. There was a mixture of anxiety and anticipation for Gu Shijie. It was the opposite for Di Fui. He was like a man who just got his thirst quenched. The moment was truly intimate for the two of them. Occasionally, the flowers would shed and dance in the swirling winds that circled them. That produced a fantastic scent. Some petals fell onto their bodies that were now drenched in sweat, gathering and forming into numerous red dots on their bare backs. A petal slowly landed in Gu Shijie's hand, which finally reminded her of something she had long forgotten. Some of her senses returned, and she pushed him away slightly all of a sudden. "Yin Qingluo creates this place, right? Where did you send her? Will she come back and see us here?" She did not want others to see what they were doing. "Don't worry. I have her locked up in the Wuxia wizardry barrier that only permits entrances, not exits. She cannot possibly escape from there. Be patient and just focus on me." He became more aggressive and completely distracted her away from her preoccupation. There was one more thing that still bothered her. If Yin Qingluo created the wizardry barrier, would she be able to tell about everything that was going on inside it? Yin Qingluo could tell that Gu Shijie was present, but she could not see what that they were doing. Yin Qingluo had been planning this plot for years. Yet, it seemed to bridge the gap between Di Fui and someone else unexpectedly. All she had created was someone else's success. Yin Qingluo was utterly frustrated with the unpleasant surprise of Gu Shijie's presence, but there was nothing she could do as she was trapped in the fires of hell. She only hoped that Di Fui would not be able to recognize Gu Shijie, and that he would think that the Gu Shijie that he was seeing was one of her many illusions. She wanted Gu Shijie to suffer just as much as she did. Every moment passed was a torment to Yin Qingluo. Her soul was getting burned up in flames. She had suffered a great deal. Evil thoughts surfaced her mind as she kept waiting for Gu Shijie to be mistakenly sent to join her in agony. 4 hours had passed, but there was still no sight of Gu Shijie. Yin Qingluo felt as though she had been waiting for an eternity. Soon, she could tell that the wizardry barrier had started to shake a little, and was slowly breaking apart. That signaled that Di Fui's poison was getting cured. Gu Shijie must be the one who came to his aid. Yin Qingluo could not hold back her tears anymore. With a cry of anguish, She was on the verge of breaking down. She wanted to end her life, but to bring the two of them down as well. However, one of her souls was still trapped in her physical body. She could not perish unless her body was dead. Difui, kill me now. Kill me. She screamed and shouted with all of her strength. Unfortunately, the confinement that Difui had created for her was completely restricted. No one could even hear her, no matter how loudly she cried out. They were happy together. The joy was so surreal to them. Yin Qingluo thought that she had everything planned out. The love potion that she made for Difui was meant to be incurable by any medicines. The only way was to perform the double physical and spiritual cultivation with a woman. She wanted Difui to have an unforgettable experience, so she made sure that the amount of joy and pleasure that accompanied the cultivation was double the usual. Also, the woman would be able to share an equal amount of pleasure from the man as well. She thought that the woman would be her. Since it would only be their souls that were entangled spiritually, their physical bodies would not experience any exhaustion at all. Difui and Gu Shijie were indeed having a great time together. It had been 3 times already. During the first round, Gu Shijie could feel that her legs were a little sore. After the second time, she could already feel that her waist was becoming a little stiff. She thought that 2 rounds were enough to quench the desire in his body, so she wanted to get up from the bed right after he cleaned her up with the cleaning spell. However, he would not let her leave. Although it had been a very pleasant experience, Gu Shijie was still a little worried about him. She pushed his chest away and said, "I think this is enough. You should not be asking for more. Do not stress out your body too much." Difui locked his arms around the top of her head. "Do not worry about me. I know my body well." Gu Shijie did not know what to say. "Baby, I have been waiting for this for so long. You have to let me enjoy it to the fullest." Astonished, Gu Shijie was surprised by his unfulfilled needs. "Fui, you are still young, so we should be more careful in this matter. You are not even 10 years old yet." After telling him her concern, she immediately had to pay the price for what she said. Difui looked at her with a crooked smile. "Baby, I did not know that I am still a child to you. Very well then, you should also know that children are quite naughty." At first, he was worried that he might hurt her, so he dared not push it to the limits. This time around, he purposely increased the speed of his actions. Every thrust was so intense and satisfying at the same time. Utterly contented, she could no longer talk and only focused on his every moment. Difui was the son of a god, and was endowed with a unique physique and soul. A year of development to him was the equivalent of a decade of growth to an ordinary man. In other words, he could achieve more progress in a year than others could in 10. Now that he was 9 years old, it was the equivalent of him being a 90-year-old man. Therefore, he was already an adult mentally and physically. Generally, no one would bring up his age when they met him, as he already seemed like a mature adult. Gu Shijie was the only woman who always paid attention to that particular detail. "Hey, have the toxins been cured or not?" After the 3rd time, Gu Shijie finally surrendered. Could he possibly be asking for more? She wanted to read his pulse but was immediately halted. Difui grabbed her hands and turned her around to change to another position. "Almost there, just a little bit more," he whispered into her ear. Helplessly, Gu Shijie could only obey. He was indeed a very, very desperate man at the moment. Since she volunteered herself, he made use of every bit of her body, from head to toe. There was hardly any distance between them. She looked at his beautiful face intently, and was immediately overwhelmed by the intense feelings of love that they shared. There were some things that she did not quite understand, but there was one thing she was sure about. He truly loved her. It was an undeniable fact. She knew very well that she loved him too. She was the happiest that she could be when they were together, even if they did not do anything. When he went missing, she felt as if there was a missing piece in her life. It was as if she was rootless and adrift, like a floating leaf with no sense of direction. She could not help but think about their previous lives and how madly in love they had been. Then she suddenly recalled something. Difui said that they had been in love since his past life. Had he recalled his memory? "Do you now remember your past? Were we married? I have a feeling that we used to live together for quite some time," Gu Shijie commented. Di Fui was slightly distracted by her question. He then planted a soft kiss on her lips to stop her from talking. Stay focused. Gu Shizhou complied and remained quiet. She was really eager to know if he had really recalled their past together. However, she needed to wait until everything was over. She was curious about what he used to do in the past and how they met. There were many other things that she wanted to find out too. The firmament stone had all the answers to her questions, but it refused to share anything with Gu Shizhou. Finally, there was a way for her to learn the truth. Baby, if you get distracted again, I will do this to you all night, and make sure that you will not be able to get off from the bed. I can go up to 7 times if that is what it takes. Di Fui bit her ears as he threatened her. Based on his abilities in bed, she believed him and dared not think about anything else at that moment. If he really insisted on doing it for 7 rounds, she would be completely exhausted by the time they were done. Time continued to pass, and Gu Shizhou had no idea how long they had been in bed. She only knew that she was fast asleep before he even got off from her. When Di Fui tried to clean her up, she thought that he was trying to make love to her again, and she quickly rejected it. No more, she begged in her sleep while holding his hand. Di Fui teased her. Baby, my toxins are not entirely cured. Settle it yourself. She could still think straight even when she was asleep. Try and look for Miss Five Fingers. Although Di Fui knew a little bit about the modern era, there were still some terms that he had never heard of before. Miss Five Fingers? Who is that? He was absolutely confused. She was surprised that he did not know what she was talking about. With a disdainful smile, she showed off her hand and explained to him, This is Miss Five Fingers. Di Fui was speechless. He reached across and took her hand. Are you offering to help me with your hands? Gu Shizhou pulled her hand away and answered scornfully. Use your own hands. He was surprised by how much she actually knew about sex. Gu Shizhou had fallen asleep in his presence. She was akin to a traveler who wandered around the world and finally found a home and someone she could trust. Her face looked calm and comfortable despite being in the presence of another man. One of her little hands still held his finger, worried that he would run away or disappear again. Gu Shizhou pulled his hand toward her and used it as a pillow for her small face. Di Fui was certainly delighted by her actions. He cuddled her tightly in his embrace. The poison had been completely removed from his body, and the wizardry barrier that Yin Qingluo made could no longer trap him in this place. He could return to the Shuro world with Gu Shizhou at any time. As he contemplated his recent predicament, he was actually very puzzled. The wizardry barrier that Yin Qingluo made was so abnormal. How did she even create this kind of poison? Meanwhile, in Gu Zijia's sleep, she mumbled about something. She said, delivered to the door, all of a sudden, and Di Fui had no clue who she was talking to in her sleep. Baby, do you want to go back? He asked in her ear. I am sleepy. Don't give me any trouble, let me sleep. Thus, Di Fui decidedly to stay quietly in that place. As long as Gu Shizhou was there with him, it did not matter where he was located. In truth, he had not recalled the memories of his so-called past life, but only confirmed from Yin Qingluo that in his previous life, he was the Lord, Huang Tuesday. He did not expect Huang Tu to be reincarnated, given that he was said to have broken the heavenly laws in the past. There were very few people who could break the heavenly laws. Perhaps in his past life, he must have been a mighty person. Did his father know the inside story? Did he have the same surname in his previous life? Who else had this memory besides Yin Qingluo? He shook his head to dismiss the countless questions that surfaced in his mind and heart. For the time being, there was no answer. Also, he was too tired to ponder about it now. Di Fui started to shift his thoughts away from his past and back to his present. Yin Qingluo was no longer an issue for him, but Yin Yanli remained a cause for concern. Furthermore, he had found out from Yin Qingluo that there was an even bigger man who hid behind him. Although the person had not officially appeared, he had certainly stirred a lot of trouble for Di Fui. The man used some dark sorcery to accelerate Yin Yanli's growth, so that he would reach the level of a golden immortal in a short period of 100 years. But what was his intention? Surely he had a bigger plan than to take Di Fui down. Was it Luo Jiuqin who was behind everything? Was he trying to steal the title of Divine Lord from his father? Seeing the type of curses that Yunqing Luo had involved herself in gave Di Fui an indication that this was the work of Luo Jiuqian. However, Luo Jiuqian had been locked away, and was not allowed to come back for at least 50,000 years. Hence, it was unlikely to be Luo Jiuqian. Whoever it was, the person must be the one who taught Yun Yanli his powers about 200 years ago. Di Fui believed that Yun Yanli intended to become the Emperor Immortal. He was personally not very concerned about who held this position as long as they did not do something terrible and misuse their power. Therefore, if Yun Yanli got this position based on his own ability, he would not intervene. However, that was obviously not the case since the man had involved himself in dark sorcery to accelerate his development. Therefore, Di Fui needed to deal with this matter. He studied his hand and noted that he was currently a level 9 golden immortal. With his speed of cultivation, it would take at least 3 years for him to achieve the level of a mighty immortal. The difference between their abilities was too significant. He looked at the person in his arms and heaved a sigh of relief. Since she was by his side, he would push himself to work harder. Of course, he would also push her to become an immortal as soon as possible, so that she could return to the upper bound with him. Besides, she had been practiced to the level of a great deity up there. Her skills should be comparable to his mother's. Gu Shijiu had told Di Fui before that her accomplishments were achieved in the lower bound. When she was still less than 50 years old, she had already cultivated to the level of a great deity. This was very extraordinary. The fact that she did so in the lower bound was even more remarkable. There were only 2 possibilities for this to happen. First, all the skills were passed to her before the death of Huang Tuesday. However, as Huang Tu disappeared, she lost her memory about it. Second, she was indeed a very extraordinary person. Among these 2, the first one seemed to make more sense to Di Fui, but he could not completely rule out the second conjecture either. After being punished by the heavenly laws and cursed to be in the Shura world, Gu Zijia's abilities had deteriorated substantially. However, perhaps her abilities would be restored once she makes it out? Di Fui bowed his head and kissed her forehead at the thought. He held her tightly in his arms and said, "Shijiu, although I am the reincarnation of Huang Tu, I still hope that you can fall in love with me in this life." This was one of the reasons why he never told Gu Shijiu that he was the reincarnation of Huang Tu even after he confirmed that with Yunqing Luo. He really wanted Gu Shijiu to love him for the man he was right now as opposed to the person in her memory, which he did not know. Di Fui calculated the time, and realized that it was still early. Since Gu Shijiu was tired, he should let her continue to rest. Therefore, he would let her sleep for another 4 hours. Right after that, they would need to return to their bodies and settle matters in the Shura world. Hua Qinyu had killed Yunqing Luo. He and Guardian Jin had been waiting outside the wizardry barrier set in place by Gu Shijiu. They were tasked to guard Yunqing Luo while waiting for Gu Shijiu to return together with Di Fui. As time passed by, the 2 of them grew rather uneasy. They were anxious, and Zhu Duqing was also worried. In fact, Zhu Duqing was more worried than them. He wanted to break into the barrier several times, but he could not enter it. Furthermore, Guardian Jin and Guardian Hua had been preventing him from doing so. The 2 guards were afraid that he would give them trouble, so Guardian Jin was assigned to follow Zhu Duqing at all times while Hua Qinyu was to guard Yunqing Luo. Yunqing Luo had been snoring away, so Hua Qinyu was not too concerned. However, Yunqing Luo seemed to have opened her eyes after some time, and Hua Qinyu was shocked by her action. He wanted to ask her if she was the culprit behind the Devil King's current predicament, but he was too stunned to think clearly at the time. "Kill me! Kill me! Hua Qinyu, please kill me. I have suffered enough. You do love me, right? Can you even stand seeing me this way? Don't you want revenge for your brother and your niece? Kill me so that you can avenge them and fulfill my request simultaneously." Although Yunqing Luo did not open her mouth to speak, Hua Qinyu could hear her as if she did. It was a very tempting request. Hua Qinyu ignored her at the beginning. However, he could not seem to resist her constant persuasions that came in the form of threats, tears, and pleas. She had used all the methods she could. Hua Qianyu's heart was shaken, and finally, he was controlled by the voice. He pulled out his sword and stabbed it into Yin Qingluo's heart. He even took the opportunity to shatter her heart into pieces. Yin Qingluo screamed momentarily, and her body fell gently to the ground. Chapter 24:18. Could not be saved. The sudden loud cry had alarmed Guardian Jean. He ran toward the sound to take a look, and was shocked by what his eyes had seen. Hua, what did you do? Hua Qinyu seemed to come to his senses, and was also stunned by what he saw. He obviously did not want to kill her, but he seemed to be momentarily possessed. He looked at Yin Qingluo to see if she was still alive. However, there were no vital signs left. She could not be saved. Zhu Duqing came over as well to check on the two of them. Just leave her be. Hua Qinyu was disappointed with himself. The Devil King had instructed us to keep her alive. Zhu Duqing did not care. The reason why your Devil King wanted to keep her alive was because of their past relationship. Since she is now dead, what can you do? By the way, why would you kill her? You even shattered her heart. Hua Qinyu lamented. She had tricked me into killing her with a magical voice. Zhu Duqing remained silent. He frowned as he walked around Yin Qingluo's body. Although nothing seemed wrong on the surface, he had a hunch that things were not what they appeared to be. Guardian Jean suddenly heard something. Hey, are the animals outside a little instigated? Zhu Duqing tried to listen, and his facial expression suddenly changed slightly. Something is wrong. As they were now deep underground, they should not be able to hear the creatures in the swamp. However, they could hear beasts approaching them from all directions right now. It was getting louder and louder, and the ground tremored more fiercely as it did. The gravel above their heads started crumbling down too. Gosh, this cave is going to collapse. Hua Qinyu expressed his concern. It felt like a level 8 earthquake, and the three of them certainly found it difficult to keep their ground. If an earthquake happened deep in a cave, it was merely a catastrophe for those present. They must escape immediately, or they would be buried deep underground. Devil King and Miss Gu are still inside the wizardry barrier. Guardian Jean yelled, and rushed to the side of the barrier. Hua Qinyu also followed him. As the two of them were in a hurry, no one brought Yin Qingluo's body with them. As they turned back, they could see that the place where she lied suddenly split into a big hole, and her body was subsequently swallowed into the hole. Because of the earthquake, all the rocks were shifted, which inevitably broke the rock array made by Gu Shijiu. There were big and small stones crashing into each other, which created a big area of dust. Zhu Duqing ran towards the barrier, and was ready to rescue Gu Shijiu at the first opportunity that he had. All three of them were now right in front of the place where the barrier stood, and in the dust, they faintly saw two figures hugging each other. As the dust was still settling, they could not see the two figures clearly. Zhu Duqing shouted, "Master Shijiu." He was about to leap over but realized that the two people, who were hugging each other, suddenly moved. He had not seen the appearance of the two people, but noticed that there was a 7-colored ray of light that appeared in front of him. A milky white layer appeared instantly, covering the two people as the other three held their breaths. What did this mean? Guardian Jean and Guardian Hua were suddenly ecstatic. Devil King. This milky white layer did not last a long time. It took a minute or two to remove the cover, but it eventually revealed the two people inside. Chapter 24:19. Could not be saved. Gu Shijiu and Di Fui emerged from the protective layer. The two of them were still in the same attire as before. One was wearing green clothes, and another one was wearing a purple robe. Gu Shijiu looked a little confused. She distinctly remembered that she had sex with Di Fui, then she was too tired and fell asleep. When she woke up, she realized that she was in a chaotic scene with boulders rolling around. Before Gu Shijiu could react, there is a white cover around her. Then there was a set of clothes automatically fitted on her body. She leaned against Di Fui and realized that he was also neatly dressed. "Baby, let's go out. Something has changed." Therefore, when the cover was withdrawn, everyone could finally see them. Gu Shijiu seemed to realize what was going on, and her pretty face turned blue. The earthquake had entirely destroyed her stone array. She distinctly remembered that she was naked before she went into Di Fui's illusion. Did everyone here see her hugging Di Fui without her clothes on? Difui's arm was around her waist, and he said 2 words, "Don't worry." He woke up very timely and was shocked to see her naked in that position. However, because things were happening too quickly, he had no time to ponder about it. He saw the surrounding stone formation was crumbling, and that there were shadows were flying toward him. Therefore, he quickly set up a wizardry barrier. Fortunately, the people around them did not see how they were tangled with each other. Otherwise, they might need to get their eyes removed. Gu Shijio breathed a sigh of relief, but she quickly became nervous when she observed her surroundings more carefully. The entire place was in ruins. Zhu Duqing was disappointed as he saw how intimate Gu Shijio and Difui were with one another. However, it was not the right time to care about these trivial matters. They should leave this place as soon as possible. He was well aware of that. Difui looked around and asked, "Where is Yin Qingluo?" Guardian Hua looked guilty. "She is dead. I killed her." Difui looked at him and almost understood the whole incident. He suddenly thought of something. The big earthquake here is related to Yin Qingluo's death. While Difui was resting with Gu Shijio in the illusion, he heard an abnormal sound. The barrier around him then disappeared like an avalanche while he heard the crazy laughter coming from Yin Qingluo. "Difui, I will pull you down with me to my grave." At that time, he wondered how he could possibly hear Yin Qingluo as he had trapped her. Now he finally understood. This poisonous swamp was the base for her evil activities. Perhaps, her soul had somehow merged with this swamp, and once she died, this swamp would be destroyed as well. As they had entered into the deepest part of the swamp, which was at least a few hundred miles away from the shore, they would not possibly be able to run out of this place. Difui pulled Zhu Duqing toward him and said, "Open your magical door." Zhu Duqing was not willing to do so. "No, it takes half of my spiritual power to open it. I opened it a few days ago, and I have not recovered yet. We should run away now. We are not far from the big hole that you used to lure the crocodile in earlier. It is useless for us to go there. I am afraid that the situation there would be worse than where we are right now. You must open the door." Difui's stance was firm. Zhu Duqing was anxious. "If I use it again, I will be pretty much redundant. I would probably not even be able to run." Difui smashed a boulder nearby into pieces. "It doesn't matter. If you can't run, I will order someone to carry you. Guardian Jean." Guardian Jean immediately stood beside Zhu Duqing. "Mr. Zhu, rest assured. I will definitely carry you, and I will not leave you behind." Zhu Duqing was speechless. He had no choice but to agree with it. He raised his hand to cast a spell, and finally, the magical door was opened. "Quick, quick. I can't hold it for long." Difui grabbed Gu Shijio and quickly jumped in. The 2 guards then followed them in. Zhu Duqing seemed to think of something all of a sudden. He smacked his head. "Gosh. I should have asked them to enter at the same time. We are going to be in trouble." Seeing that the entire hole was going to collapse, Zhu Duqing did not dare to delay his escape any longer, and also jumped in. There were large meteorites in the sky that were on fire, and headed for the ground. As they hit the land on such high impact, the entire place shook and cracked all over. There was also magma in between the cracks that swallowed everything that passed by. The beasts in the poisonous swamp were running aimlessly as they did not know where to go. Some of them fell into the magma, while others perished from the fireballs that crashed onto them. The scene certainly resembled an apocalypse. The fierce beasts that attacked them before could not do anything in the face of the natural disaster. When Gu Shijio and Difui jumped through the door, they found themselves still in the poisonous swamp again. It was just as good as walking out of the cave. "This guy is completely unreliable." Gu Shijio was disappointed. She looked around and asked Difui, "Why haven't the others reached yet?" There were only 2 of them there. Difui pulled her along with him as he avoided the falling destructive fireballs. The magical door that Zhu Duqing controls is very strange. Not everyone that jumps through the door will go to the same place. When he offended me in the past, I chased after him to the point where he had to open one of his doors. I followed him into one as he fled but ended up in a different place. I think it is the same this time. I thought he was able to control it before and intentionally sent me somewhere else. It seems I was mistaken. Gu Shijie was speechless for a moment. She could not believe that her apprentice had done something so stupid. Does that mean that all of us are in different places? Such an unreliable bamboo man. He is certainly not someone you can count on. You picked up this apprentice rather hastily. When we meet him again, you should drop him from your apprenticeship. And when you are ready for a new disciple, I will help you to examine the person and make sure that he or she will satisfy you. Di Fui took the opportunity to make demands and let off steam about Zhu Duqing. He had not been impressed by the man. Since he got close to Gu Shijie, he had always wanted to leave him behind somewhere. Gu Shijie did not respond to Di Fui's complaints. Instead, she chose to focus her attention on their surroundings. The poisonous air around them was still very potent. Fortunately, the clothes that Di Fui had given Gu Shijie were very good at blocking out any unwanted particles from the air. Moreover, Di Fui had set up a protective barrier around them so that the poisonous atmosphere would not harm them. Due to the calamity of the situation, they did not know their exact location and did not know which direction to go. Flying was probably their best option. As expected, they encountered all kinds of beasts, but since everyone was simply trying to escape, they did not have time to attack and hurt each other. It was such a rare sight. In the midst of finding their way out, Di Fui and Gu Shijie took out their directed audio spells and tried to contact the two guards as well as Zhu Duqing, but they could not be contacted. Perhaps the poisonous swamp had indirectly blocked their signal. Since the rest of them could not be contacted, Gu Shijie and Di Fui could only concern themselves with breaking out of this place first. Hopefully, the three of them were already outside. Gu Shijie followed Di Fui into the air as he used his spiritual power to help them fly. No matter what he encountered along the way, he held Gu Zijie's hand tightly with no intention of letting go. This feeling gave Gu Shijie some peace of mind. She somehow remembered her last moment in the upper bound, where a disaster had struck her, and all the immortals that were with her had fled away. She was alone at the time and finally fell into a whirlpool. She then found herself in the Shura world with no memories of herself. This landslide somehow reminded her of that calamity. The main difference was that she had Di Fui by her side this time. They would face the challenge together. This feeling was so good. She looked at the flaming rocks that fell from the sky like rain. Was this the meteorite rain that she had heard of? It looked so beautiful, but it was also deadly. There seemed to be a woman's laughter in the air again. She sounded like a person who had lost her mind. Gu Shijie frowned as the loud screams made her eardrums uncomfortable. Is Yin Qingluo still alive? Has she turned into a devil? No, she is dead. She can't be alive. However, she had probably attached her soul to this swamp. Therefore, when she died, the swamp also turned into a state of chaos. This voice is probably her leftover resentment on this land. Don't be afraid. Don't worry, Di Fui. Even if she is alive, I am not afraid of her. Gu Shijie laughed. If it were not because of you, I would not have paid any attention to her. Di Fui held her little hand as he responded. Baby, I know that you are a strong girl. There is nothing that can knock you down. At such a critical moment, this guy still had the mood to sweet talk. Gu Shijie pulled him together with her and teleported away. Let's continue this conversation once we escape. For now, please obediently follow me. Gu Zijie's teleportation technique was truly remarkable. Each time she used it, she could travel about 30 miles. Furthermore, her sense of direction was top-notch. Therefore, although she was not sure where she is at the moment, she could tell that the width of the swamp was probably about 400 miles. Hence, if she continued traveling in one direction, she could break out from here in about 15 teleportations. Unfortunately, even after she had teleported more than 20 times, she found herself still stuck in the crux of the swamp. The meteorite rain still poured down heavily, and the devil-like whistling sound continued to spook the place. Had they hit a ghost wall? Or was this something more complicated? With Gu Shijie and Di Fui's abilities, a ghost wall could not actually trap them. They could easily break through any barrier of that sort in a matter of minutes. Yet this time they were stuck. Because of the earthquake and the constant bombardment of the flaming meteorites, There were very few places where they could actually settle down to think at this swamp. Not to mention that there was rolling magma everywhere, and occasional herds of beasts rampaging the land together. It was the end of the world for most of them. The air was heating up so badly that Gu Shijie began to hold her breath. Whenever she took a breath, she felt like she was inhaling a mouthful of dust. It burnt her throat badly as well. Di Fui's eyes darkened at their current predicament. It appears that he had underestimated Yin Qingluo's insanity. It seemed that when she threatened to bury everyone with her, she really meant it. At the same time, it could be said that the person behind all this madness must be someone very mighty. Little Tsang, do you recognize this sorcery? Is there any way to break it? Gu Shijie asked the firmament stone on her wrist for help. However, it seemed dead and unresponsive. This bastard always malfunctioned during critical times. Gu Shijie had given up. However, Di Fui looked at the firmament stone and suddenly raised his sleeves on the jade bracelet. The firmament stone immediately flashed and shone brightly. Gu Shijie suddenly remembered that she had sealed the 5 senses of firmament stone before entering the illusion to find Di Fui. No wonder it did not have any response earlier. After the firmament stone woke up, it was still a bit confused by its surroundings, so it asked a series of questions. Where are we? Is this a meteorite rain? Is this an illusion or reality? Is this the end of the world? Master, I am impressed. You actually saved him. It looks like he is fully recovered. The firmament stone's last remark was said with elation. Gu Shijie was speechless. She seriously doubted whether this guy knew what she did after she entered into the illusion. Or was he a pimp? Anyway, it was naturally not the time to discuss this with it. Gu Shijie was trying to explain the current situation to the firmament stone. Before she could really feed it with some useful information, Di Fui had interrupted them. He quickly told the firmament stone about Yin Qingluo. Although it was brief, he seemed to cover all the important points. Finally, he asked the firmament stone, she should have cast a spell in this swamp. Do you have a way to crack it? The firmament stone did not respond, but it started to flash. It looked as if it was searching for relevant information inside itself. After a while, it spoke weakly. This spell seems like a combination of ancient and modern magic. It is extremely complicated to set this up and requires very stringent conditions. The firmament stone began to list everything it knew in detail before it was interrupted by Gu Shijie. I am not interested in how it came about. I just want to know how to crack it. The firmament stone was bothered by her impatience. After I explain the origin of this spell, then you can analyze the appropriate way out. Di Fui hugged Gu Shijie. It's all right. Let it speak. Perhaps we can analyze clues from the people behind the scenes from its explanations. Gu Shijie decided to give in, and kept quiet while the firmament stone continued. According to the firmament stone, the person who taught Yin Qingluo the spell must be at least close to the level of a great deity, or even slightly above it. It seemed that the culprit had used a spell to bring Yin Qingluo back as a new person, and even transferred some of his skills to Yin Qingluo in the process of teaching her. It was because of this person's support that Yin Qingluo was able to tie her soul to this swamp. Yin Qingluo used this swamp as her last resort to bring her enemies down. And so here they were in this situation. Escaping this place would be impossible without breaking the spell cast by Yin Qingluo. After the analysis from the firmament stone, Gu Zijie's heart sank. Based on what it had said, Zhu Duqing and the rest would not be able to escape either. As she was with Di Fui, they were able to protect themselves from the meteorite rain and lava due to the wizardry barrier that Di Fui had set up to protect them. However, the 2 guards that came along with them were incomparable to Di Fui, so they would have probably perished by now. As for Mr. Zhu, this guy had some strange skills and magical weapons, but whether he could resist the melting magma was still an unknown. The burning question right now was, who was the person behind all this mess? According to the firmament stone, the magic involved was from a time even later than when Gu Shijie was born. If Gu Zijie's era was in the year 2018, then this person probably existed in the year 3018, which was indeed a distant future. Perhaps, The person behind the scene was someone who could freely travel through time. Having learned some powerful spells from his or her era, the individual probably decided to travel through time and space into the distant future, and learned about the powerful spells that existed there. Gu Shijiu frowned. With such an analysis, she felt that this person was somewhat like Long Fan. Her heart sank at the thought, and the more she pondered about it, the more she thought it was true. For example, Long Fan used very modern technology to mix the genes of a human with the genes of a beast in order to create a half-orc. Furthermore, the young palace master, who was a subordinate of Yin Yanli, had once owned a group of half-orcs. Was this a coincidence? Did Long Fan get reborn into this world after his death? Was it possible? She remembered that Long Fan died with his spiritual power at level 9. The person behind the scene was close to or already at the level of great deity. Furthermore, this person seemed to be deliberately targeting the two of them. The strange part of it all was that this person was strong enough to fight with Gu Shijiu and Difui. So why would he or she put in so much effort into setting up a trap? Why would he or she be so concerned with hiding in the dark? What was the purpose? This person must know his or her own strength, but seemed to prefer to use other people's knives to take down enemies. What are you thinking? Difui looked at her and asked. Gu Shijiu did not want to hide her thoughts from him now, so she told him everything in her mind. Of course, she also storied about Long Fan's past and her previous encounters with him. Some of her memories were somewhat vague because of Huang Tu's presence in them, but she could still remember the general context. Difui thought about her revelations for a moment. This seems very similar to the way Luo Jiuchen dealt with the Divine Lord and Great Devil. During that time, Luo Jiuchen was a substitute lord, and he was constantly monitored. He would be punished if he was caught scheming, so he frequently used other people to kill his enemies. Of course, the person we are dealing with this time should not be him. The timing is not right. Both of them analyzed the situation while still in the wizardry barrier. Although they had some clues right now, nothing was certain. Meanwhile, in the vicinity, there seemed to be a sea of magma engulfing the remaining creatures. Breathing the air was rather impossible too. Even the inside of the wizardry barrier had started to become inhabitable. Gu Zijia's low spiritual power could not protect her, so she began to feel a little bit breathless. The two of them had to think of a way to quickly get out of this place, even if they had to pay a high price. In the end, the firmament stone enlightened them with a way out. This method was somewhat ridiculous, however. Devil King, the blood from your heart can break all the wizardry barriers in this world. You may want to try using it, but you will be injured. If it were not the last resort, the firmament stone would not tell them this method. Gu Shijiu frowned. No. She had worked so hard to get him safe and cured. She was not keen to see him injured again. Difui thoughtfully looked at firmament stone. Are you sure of this? Of course, I am very sure. The firmament stone vowed. Difui did not say anything more, and condensed a sharp and thin knife from his palm. The blade had a groove, and it was somehow similar to the knife which Yin Qingluo used to extract the blood from her heart. He started to take off his robe to start the process. Gu Shijiu was shocked and reached out to grab his hand that held the knife. Don't. Maybe we can find another way. Let's not rush. Difui lifted his arms and hugged her. Don't worry. I am confident. He took the opportunity to seal her acupuncture point to avoid her from stopping him. Difui did not want her to see him drawing blood directly from his heart, so after he sealed her acupuncture point, he also covered her eyes with a cloth. Be a good girl. Just give me a moment. He also whispered a sentence into her ears. You will need to take me out later. After Gu Zijia's acupuncture point was sealed, she could not say anything. She could only stand there like a root in the ground. Her heart continued to sink, even though she could not see what was happening. It seemed to be just a moment, but for Gu Shijiu, it was like an eternity. Finally, her acupoint was unsealed. She pulled off the cloth on her face and looked at Difui, who was trembling. She was afraid when she saw him stained with blood and seriously injured on the ground. The situation was better than what she had expected, however. Aside from his pale face, there was nothing visibly wrong with him. She could see that there were drops on his palm. The blood was purplish-red and translucent, as if a circle of Buddha light surrounded it. He did not expect the blood from his heart to be this color. After being stunned for a second, he began to follow the instructions given to him by the firmament stone to make the necessary spell. Following the procedure very carefully, he soon noticed the blood in his palm rising into the air. The blood seemed to crash into the wizardry barrier in the air, and soon, the sharp and fierce woman's laughter suddenly stopped and dissipated unwillingly. After that, there was a green field in the sky not far away, which was the scenery of the grassland outside the swamp. The wizardry barrier was finally broken. Gu Shijiu did not dare to waste any time. She grabbed Di Fui and quickly teleported to safety. Rolling clouds, green grass, and swaying flowers filled the scene. Although this was a rather ordinary sight, having just escaped from the cursed swamp, it was something they truly missed. Gu Shijiu and Di Fui stood in the grass and heaved a long sigh of relief. Finally, they had come out from the barrier. Gu Shijiu felt that her legs were a little bit soft from all the commotion. Di Fui was leaning on her, and feeling somewhat lazy to move. Gu Shijiu tugged his sleeve. "Let me check your injury." She was worried about him. He knew that he could not stop her. Therefore, he did not say anything and untied his robe to reveal the wound on his chest. The wound looked very thin, very unlike being stabbed by a knife. It was more similar to being pricked by a thick needle. It did not look dangerous at all. Gu Shijiu looked at his face again and asked, "Is it painful?" She took out a bottle of ointment and applied it to his wound. Di Fui smiled as he looked at her. He was happy that she was tending to his injury. This ointment that she used had the effect of regenerating muscles, which was the best for a wound caused by the knife. After she applied it on his chest, the wound started to heal almost instantly. Di Fui leaned on Gu Shijiu and said, "Shijiu, let's go back to the Devil Kingdom together." Okay. Di Fui never expected her to answer him so quickly. He thought that she would have a phobia to go back to the devil world. He had even prepared some witty responses to encourage her to put her worries behind. In this case, it was not needed. The girl he loved was always genuine. If she liked him, she would give him her best. Besides, Gu Shijiu was always a straightforward person. Hence, if she said she was okay, he could take her word for it. Gu Shijiu looked at the swamp again. There was a sea of fire that was clearly visible, but nothing else could be seen. She was worried by that sight. "I am not sure how Mr. Zhu and the two guards doing. Should we go back and look for them?" She did not want to leave her friends behind. Before Di Fui answered, and a door suddenly appeared in the distance, and 3 people fell out at the same time. Gu Zijius shone brightly at the sight. She was overjoyed. The 3 people were Zhu Duqing and the 2 guards. However, 3 of them looked somewhat strange. Their hair was burned, and so were their clothes. There were ashes all over their faces. It looked like 3 of them had just rolled out of the black coal oven. Chapter 24-25. Meeting. When the 3 men standing in the distance saw Gu Shijiu and Di Fui, they felt like crying. The 2 guards rushed over and kneeled in front of Di Fui. "My Devil King, it's good that you are safe." Zhu Duqing did not hurry to them, but subconsciously turned his body and put his clothes on properly. He tidied up his hair, and even took out a wet cloth to wipe his face. When he turned around again, he looked normal. He smiled at Gu Shijiu pleasantly and said, "Master Shijiu, I knew that you would be safe." Di Fui glanced at him and seemed to smile. "I did not expect the 3 of you to end up together. Zhu Duqing, I thought you said that you would be exhausted once you opened the door again? You look fine now though." Zhu Duqing smiled. "If it were not your 2 subordinates, who gave me 2 of the best pills I have consumed that helped me restore my spiritual power, we would be flying pieces of ash right now. The door I opened before was set to a grassland thousands of miles away. I didn't expect it to lead us back into the swamp. There were tumbling magma everywhere. I had nowhere to run." What he saw was consistent with Gu Shijiu and Di Fui's situation. He added, "When I noticed a gap in the wizardry barrier, I quickly opened another magical door so that we could escape." His explanation seemed to make sense while the 2 guards were also nodding their heads in agreement, so Di Fui dismissed the matter. Zhu Duqing asked, This swamp had been like a hot pot. We could not find the exit even after we ran in every direction. Our legs could not even run anymore by then. Did you create the exit? How did you do that? He looked at Di Fui and continued. You look pale. Are you injured? Di Fui looked back at him. Do you actually care about my well-being? Or you are simply curious? Zhu Duqing waved the goose feather fan in his hand as if he was a fairy. After all, we are a team. There is nothing wrong for me to be concerned about you, right? Di Fui did not care about him. He leaned gently on Gu Shijiao and ordered his two subordinates, go and bring the vehicle over. When they came here, they parked their vehicle outside the swamp. However, it was quite far from here. Guard Jin and Guardian Hua responded to the order, and were about to head off. However, Zhu Duqing spoke, we can take my vehicle. It is nearby. He blew a very long whistle into the sky, and the sound seemed to travel a very long distance. He believed that his donkey would be able to hear it, and would come over very soon. Unfortunately, they had waited for half an hour, and he still did not see the shadow of his donkey. Gu Shijiao was somewhat puzzled. She knew the skill of the donkey. None of the other creatures on this grassland were a threat to it, and it was generally very reliable. Zhu Duqing felt a little bit uneasy. He blew a whistle again. After a long while, there was a scream in the distance. The voice of this person seemed to signal a hint of anger. Zhu Duqing's facial expression changed. He wrinkled his brows and yelled, "Who detained my donkey?" "It's me." There was a voice in the distance. It was clear and charming. Gu Zijia's facial expression changed this time. She recognized that voice. It was Yin Yanli. He appeared at the scene at lightning speed, which shocked everyone. Di Fui, who had been leaning on Gu Shijiao, quickly stood up straight again. Chapter 24-26. Meeting 2. The donkey was behind Yin Yanli. It seemed to be tied or unable to walk properly. When it saw Gu Shijiao and Zhu Duqing, it immediately screamed. Its two big eyes blinked for help. Yin Yanli noticed Gu Shijiao, and he looked surprised. "Shijiao, why are you here?" Next, he glanced at Di Fui with darkened eyes. "Your Highness Nianma." Di Fui flicked his sleeve and smiled calmly. "Your Highness Yun, how are you doing?" Yin Yanli looked conflicted, but very soon he put a smile on his face. "I am good. Where have you been over the past year? Shijiao and I have been looking for you. Fortunately, you are alive." His eyes turned to Guardian Jin and Guardian Hua. These two people look like they just came out from the swamp. Their faces are so greasy though. "Who are they?" "They are Fuya's friends," Gu Shijiao replied. She then asked, "Yanli, why are you here?" Yin Yanli sighed. "I have been looking for you. I was afraid that you had met with an accident. I happened to pass by the swamp today and noticed that something was odd, so I rushed over. I didn't expect to meet you. It is such a coincidence." His eyes then fell on Zhu Duqing. "I didn't expect Mr. Zhu to be here too." Zhu Duqing proudly smiled. "The world is my home. Why is it so strange to see me here? And why are you giving my donkey a difficult time?" Yin Yanli smiled calmly. "I couldn't help myself. I didn't know that this donkey is Mr. Zhu's spiritual pet. I am sorry about that. When I came here, I bumped into this donkey. As it was quite special, I had given it an unnatural amount of attention. As a result, it was offended and kicked me." "Why are you staring at me? Is there anything wrong for me to stare at you? Bastard, I will kick you if you stare again. Do you dare to kick me? I will lock your legs. Bastard, I doubt if you dare to even come near me. I have my gang. Master, please come and help me." That was the conversation between Yin Yanli and the donkey earlier. Yin Yanli lifted his sleeves, and the four hooves of the donkey regained their freedom. It immediately ran to Zhu Duqing's side, and then looked at Yin Yanli angrily. Yin Yanli did not care about it. His eyes returned to the swamp. "Shijiao, did you just get out of there? Do you know what happened in the swamp?" "I think it was a natural disaster. There appeared to be meteorite-like fireballs falling like rain in there. The creatures inside were all killed." When Yin Yanli and Gu Shijiao were separated, he did not know that she already knew everything about him. So when they met again, Gu Shijiao continued to pretend as though she did not know anything. She chatted with him like a friend. Moreover, Yun Yanli did not know the identity of the Devil King, and Di Fui did not look the part right now. So Yun Yanli would not be aware of that information. Yun Yanli's eyes slightly flashed. He still had the intention to pursue Gu Shijiu. Hence, before his true identity was revealed, he really did not want to offend her. Di Fui's arm hugged Gu Zijia's waist. Shijiu, I'm tired. Let's go. Gu Shijiu nodded and said goodbye to Yun Yanli. Would Yun Yanli let them go so easily? He smiled and spoke. Shijiu, I haven't seen you for a long time. I want to talk to you. He then turned to Di Fui and said, Your Highness Nianma Mr. Zhu, there are many questions that I would like to ask both of you. Let's go to Lugua City and have a drink together, shall we? Today is the day that there will be blood rain. Hence we should go to the city to avoid the rain. Yun Yanli flicked his finger into the air, and a blue light emerged in the sky. In just a brief moment, a large car that could accommodate 10 people seemed to come down from the sky, accompanied by 3 flying horses. There were 4 green-clothed masters in the car. Before the car landed, the 4 men had jumped out of the car. They fell on the ground, without triggering any dust, and bowed to Yun Yanli. City owner, what is the order? Yun Yanli smiled and looked at Gu Shijiu. Shijiu, Mr. Fui, Mr. Zhu, please. Gu Shijiu raised her eyebrows and looked at him. City owner? Have you become a city owner? Which city is it? Yun Yanli sounded calm. Lugua City. Shijiu, I don't want your people to be bullied again in Luohua City, so I managed to win the position of the city owner of the Lugua City. I got your people to Lugua City 2 days ago, and they have been settling down. They miss you very much. It's good for you to go back and visit them. Gu Shijiu remained silent. It seemed like Yun Yanli was using her people to threaten her. He obviously knew her weakness. Yun Yanli was extremely good at martial arts. If she went against his wishes at this time, it would trigger his suspicion. Furthermore, they did not stand a chance against him right now. Gu Shijiu was not worried about her own safety, however. She was more concerned for Di Fui, who had just drawn blood from his heart. Although he could still stand, when he leaned on Gu Shijiu, she could feel that there was sweat on his body. He was very weak now, and he needed to rest. The 2 guards seemed to be exhausted too. If they really had a battle with Yun Yanli, they could not even last a few rounds. As for Zhu Duqing, he looked like he would collapse at any time. It seemed that their best course of action would be to follow his instructions first, and plan how to get rid of him later. As long as they did not strain the relationship with Yun Yanli, they still had the opportunity to leave without a battle. Therefore, she hinted to Di Fui about her plan and responded to Yun Yanli, I see. Thanks for your care. If that is the case, we will just follow you. Di Fui slouched and yawned once he heard Gu Zijia's response. You can invite me to go to the city. However, I am not comfortable sharing the same cabin with other people. Unless you leave this car to me, I will not go together with you. Yun Yanli was speechless. Di Fui laughed casually. Mr. Yin, I think you are not sincere enough with your invitation. Yun Yanli sighed. No. Mr. Fui, please. I still have other cars. He turned to a guard at the side and instructed, Get my silver car here as well. The guard acknowledged his request and immediately whistled. After a while, another car appeared from the air. It was a silver car with a silver horse in front of it that looked very imposing. Yun Yanli was like a peacock that eagerly wanted to open his own gorgeous feathers in front of Gu Shijiu. The car that he summoned was more luxurious than the one before. He waved to Gu Shijiu. Shijiu, I haven't seen you for a long time. Would you take a car with me? I have a lot of stories to tell you. Before Gu Shijiu could answer, Di Fui leaned on her more forcefully. Baby, can you stay with me? I have a lot of stories to tell you. He secretly grabbed Gu Zijia's little hand gently. Gu Shijiu understood his message. She smiled at Yun Yanli. Sorry, I just found him not long ago. I want to talk to him. When we are back in Lugua City, I will look for you, and we will talk again. She pulled Di Fui with her and teleported into a carriage. Yun Yanli was speechless. He clenched his fists out of jealousy while his eyes seemed to want to murder someone. He originally wanted to pull a trick on Di Fui if he were traveling alone. He did not expect the man to be so alert to bring Gu Shijie along with him. Since Gu Shijie was present with Di Fui, Yun Yanli was no longer comfortable about his plan to ambush the man during the journey. Besides, there would still be plenty of opportunities now that they had to follow Yun Yanli around. His main concern was to make sure that Gu Shijie was unaware of his evil plan. Yun Yanli turned his attention to Zhu Duqing and asked, "Mr. Zhu, would you like to come with me?" Zhu Duqing was obviously hesitant to do so. He stammered as he replied, I have my own carriage. There is no need to trouble you." He looked into his sleeve and took out something greenish. With a toss, the ball of green light turned into an emerald bamboo carriage. He attached the cart to the back of the donkey and entered into the donkey-drawn carriage. Yun Yanli studied the two escorts from the Devil Palace. These men had kept a very low profile, so he did not know their identities. Moreover, the two men were not wearing their official uniforms, making it even more difficult to learn of their origin. Yun Yanli was very curious about Di Fui's dealings over the past year that he was missing. The two escorts were the best source of information for Yun Yanli at that moment, so he condescendingly wanted to invite the men to share his ride. However, before he could raise his invitation, Di Fui was already demanding for their presence. "Both of you should be here guiding the carriage, right? Do you really think that you are two honorable guests waiting to be invited on board?" Therefore, Guardian Jin and his companion gave Yun Yanli a quick gesture of farewell, and proceeded to Di Fui's carriage. Yun Yanli's men, on the contrary, were sent away from the carriage by Di Fui. The man had made it clear that he would not trust any strangers to guide his carriage. Yun Yanli was furious by his smart demands. He had left Yun Yanli clueless and with no immediate leads. He tried hard to stay calm in that situation, even though he wanted to smash the carriage into pieces and destroy the man inside it. Yun Yanli's carriage was rather clean and neat. The interior was decorated elegantly. The seats covered were all covered in embellished brocades while warm carpets filled the floor. There was also a table full of fruits and water. It was a luxurious ride indeed. Di Duyi was half lying on the seat, drenched in sweat. Gu Shijie held his hand tightly to examine his pulse, and was shocked by the result. His pulse showed signs that his life was coming to an end. Needless to say, she could tell that the team that retrieving the blood directly from his heart to break through the wizardry barrier had been too excruciating for him. He was so weak that any ordinary man could easily take him down. Fortunately, he could still hold himself upright in front of Yun Yanli earlier. Otherwise, Gu Shijie might have expected Yun Yanli to attack him there and then. Gu Shijie believed that there were two reasons why Yun Yanli did not ambush them earlier. Firstly, she suspected that Yun Yanli would not want to expose his true intention to her. And secondly, he was unsure of Di Fui's strength at that very moment. They had not seen each other for over a year, and any careless act could lead to Yun Yanli's demise. Nonetheless, Gu Shijie was sure that Yun Yanli would surely attack him someday, given how much he despised Di Fui. "Fui, I think we should quietly leave this carriage using my teleportation ability," she directed an audio message to him. The carriage belonged to Yun Yanli, so she could not be sure if there were any hidden traps. She did not want to take the risk. Di Fui locked his eyes on her while leaning against his seat. "If we leave all of a sudden, he might hurt your people." Gu Shijie hesitated a little. "I am not worried about them. As long as Yun Yanli and I do not turn hostile, he will not use my people against me for the time being. You are the one who is in the most danger. If he realizes how weak you are, he will surely attack you. You cannot afford to be injured any further." Gu Shijie truly cared about her people. Although they were not exactly from the same background, they were the ones who nursed her back to health when she needed shelter. She was concerned for their safety and would not wish to see them die as a result of her matters with Yun Yanli. She would do anything to try and keep them safe. She would be willing to risk her life for her people. However, selfishly speaking, Di Fui meant more to her than all of her people combined. Especially because of his current state, she did not want to put Di Fui in danger just because of the villagers. Di Fui knew her well enough to understand her thoughts. He held her hand to reassure her. Don't worry. I know ways to escape. Gu Shijiu finally had a glimpse of hope. How? Di Fui pressed his finger against her lips and said, the heavenly secret cannot be revealed. Baby, just do as I say when the time comes. Gu Shijiu could finally heave a sigh of relief. She pushed his hand away and teased, stop trying to touch me all the time. There could be surveillance devices in here. Delighted, Di Fui twisted her words and said, does that mean I am allowed to touch you if there are no surveillance devices around? The man would flirt her at every chance that he had. Gu Shijiu ignored him and continued to check every corner of the carriage. Meanwhile, Di Fui was smiling in the carriage. Her actions showed how much she cared for him. There is no need to check. This is Yin Yanli's personal carriage. I know he is a prudent man, but he surely will not put himself under surveillance. It is hard to tell. This man may have come prepared. If he was willing to surrender his personal carriage to us, there might be something here. It is better to look around and be prepared. Like an expert, Gu Shijiu searched the entire carriage thoroughly, not leaving any stone unturned. The result proved that Di Fui was right. There were no surveillance devices in the carriage. She was finally relieved. Lie down. She turned her attention back to Di Fui. Di Fui was caught by surprise. Let me have a look at your injury. She was worried about him and wanted to check his injury earlier, but she was worried that it might reveal Di Fui's weakness to his enemy. Di Fui hesitated. There is no need to check. The wound is fine. When my spiritual power returns, I will meditate and get back to full health. Gu Shijiu could not care less about what he said. She went on top of him and pushed him down. I do not believe what you have said. I need to see it for myself. Di Fui said nothing more. He could not fight with her at that moment, so he decided to stay put and let her do whatever she wanted to do. Baby, are you trying to take advantage of me when I have no strength to resist? He teased. Gu Shijiu took off his robes, so the incident seemed inappropriate. Stop messing around. I have had enough of your sweet talk. Do you really think that I will be fooled so easily? Di Fui was speechless. He was indeed trying to divert her attention so that she would not examine his body. He had underestimated her resolve to make sure that he was all right. Gu Shijiu finally had a clear view of the wound on his chest and gasped in surprise. The wound was not treated at all. In fact, there was a swollen piece of flesh dangling on his chest. The condition explained why he could barely stand on his own. But Di Fui had already applied the best medicines that he had on the wound. Why would it worsen? The wound looks a little gruesome, but it is really not a big deal. Di Fui tried to comfort her as soon as he noticed her pale face. The method he had used to retrieve the blood from his heart would definitely leave a bad wound. To make things worse, he had to support a wizardry barrier around them while attempting to retrieve the blood. The combination of the two was clearly beyond his current capabilities. Furthermore, he even had to use his spiritual power to break the wizardry barrier that Yun Qingluo had set up to ambush them. It was likely that the poisonous air around the swamp might have infected the wound as well, making it worse than any of them had anticipated. Without sufficient spiritual power, he could not drive the toxins out of his body. Therefore, all he could do at that moment was to endure the pain. Luckily for him, his body was trained to be resistant to toxins. Moreover, he already consumed an antitoxin pill to suppress the effects of the poison. Otherwise, things would have been a lot worse. Chapter 2430. The Purple Cloud Mushroom 3. After a brief examination, Gu Shijiu could already assess the extent of his injury. Di Fui, am I not important to you at all? Why are you still trying to look tough even at this critical point? She complained. Di Fui sighed. I do not want you to be worried. As a proud man, he did not want to be exposed in his moment of weakness in front of his woman. Moreover, he knew he could handle the injury. All he needed was time. Although he was not even 10 years old yet, he was physically and mentally an adult. He wanted to be a man that she could count on. A man should do everything he can to keep his woman away from trouble. On top of those reasons, he definitely did not want Gu Shijiu to see him as a child. Therefore, he needed to show her his best self. His character was somewhat different from Celestial Master's was from the past. After all, celestial masters had lived long enough to understand the realities of life. He did not care about anything at all, so he would do anything as he pleased. The teenage Difui was still different, and cared about how Gu Shizhou perceived him. Gu Shizhou looked at him intensely and said, "There is no need for you to act so strong in front of me. I will not laugh at you." She started to try to treat the wound. Difui found her words somewhat familiar to him. It was like déjà vu. Curious, he started to make some mental calculations. Huang Tu must have been more than 10,000 years old before he was immortalized, and Gu Shizhou was only about 200 years old now. Deducting her years in heaven, they must have met when she was only a teenager. A man that old must have found Gu Shizhou to be only a child at that age. Difui knew how much he cared for Gu Shizhou in his previous life. A woman like her, who was both strong and independent, would not ask for his help so easily, so he must have told her the same thing many times before. Their situations now were the opposite of how they were before. He used to be jealous of his previous self, but things were slightly different now. Whether he was Huang Tu or Difui, she had fallen in love with him again without any confirmation of his actual identity. Her love for him was genuine. No obstacle could keep them apart anymore. Difui was ecstatic by the thought. In fact, he was so happy that he could not even feel the pressure on his wound. He was smiling the whole time. Gu Shizhou was using her spiritual power to put pressure on his wound in an attempt to draw the toxic blood out of his body by force. She knew that the process could be quite painful, and was worried that he might not be able to take it. Therefore, she was surprised by the big smile on his face. "What are you laughing at? Is this not painful?" How could he not feel any pain? Difui answered very seriously, "It is painful. Baby, shower me with love, and it will be all right." Seeing that he was still in the mood to joke around, she believed that he must be able to manage the pain. Therefore, Gu Shizhou decided to continue the treatment without any concern. However, having been brought back to reality, Difui finally realized that he could no longer take the pain. "Baby, can you be slightly gentle with me? It is painful." Gu Shizhou teased him. "It would be better for you if I pushed harder." Fortunately for the man, she did not really mean it, and he could instantly tell that she was gentler with him. The firmament stone suddenly interrupted her during the treatment. "I am not overthinking. I am not overthinking." Gu Shizhou was speechless. She raised her arm and sealed away all of the firmament stone's senses. Gu Shizhou looked down and caught Difui watching her intensely. Her heart skipped a beat. She was undoubtedly left in awe of his charm. She was surprised that he could make her heart race even without uttering a word. "Shizhou! Shizhou!" There was a voice coming from behind the carriage. It was Yin Yanli. "What is the matter?" Gu Shizhou responded calmly. "Is Prince Nianma all right?" Yin Yanli seemed concerned. He was actually worried that Gu Shizhou and Difui might teleport away, so he needed to initiate a random conversation with them to make sure that they were still in the carriage. "I am not okay." Difui suddenly interrupted. "I am so weak that I am now on the brink of dying. Would you like to come over here and have a look?" His firm and sarcastic tone would have certainly misled any audience about his actual current condition. Yin Yanli gave him an awkward response. "Prince Nianma, you must be joking." Difui simply answered, "Am I?" Yin Yanli felt that the conversation was meaningless. He felt as though the man was mocking him, but could not voice his dissatisfaction. He politely ended the conversation and decided not to talk between the carriages. In fact, he had already set up a small wizardry barrier that surrounded Gu Zijia's entire carriage. If she used her teleportation skill, the wizardry barrier would immediately alert Yin Yanli of the situation. He suspected that Gu Shizhou had unraveled part of the truth, and that Difui was severely injured from the events in the poisonous swamp, so the wizardry barrier was actually a test. If Gu Shizhou had indeed found out the truth, he believed that she would definitely teleport away with Difui to safety, given Difui's condition. However, instead of running away, Gu Shizhou and Difui stayed. Hence, it was safe to assume that they were unaware of his plot. The main problem that he had was that Difui knew exactly how Yin Yanli felt about him. They had an intense discussion the last time they had met. Since Di Fui did not seem to have the intention to leave, Yin Yanli immediately assumed that Di Fui must have thought that he was strong enough to fight him right now. Either that or he must be thinking that Yin Yanli would not dare to touch him in front of Gu Shijiu. Did Di Fui really think that Yin Yanli could not do anything to him because of Gu Zijia's presence? From their brief encounter, Yin Yanli was unable to assess Di Fui's level of kung fu. Moreover, Di Fui had refused to show off his strength, so there was no way Yin Yanli could tell how powerful the 10-year-old had become. Before they arrived at their destination, Gu Shijiu managed to give Di Fui a thorough detoxification. She helped him up and asked hoarsely, "How do you feel?" "Much better," Di Fui reassured. Then he sat with his legs crossed and started meditating. The place was so scarce of spiritual energy, so Di Fui needed the help of a spiritual stone and some Chinese herbs to restore his spiritual power. The spiritual stone that he currently possessed was a very rare find of the highest quality. Upon absorption, the spiritual stone was able to restore at least a tenth of his spiritual power. However, as the spiritual stone was formed through the ferocious beast's internal alchemy, the stone bore a high level of impurities. Hence, Di Fui would need to cleanse the stone before absorption, but was too weak to do so this time. Consequently, he required the 1,000-year-old glossy Ganoderma to cleanse the stone. Gu Shijiu saw the glossy Ganoderma and was suddenly inspired. She dug into her storage bag and found a small bottle. A red pill that was the size of a red bean rolled onto her palm. She offered it to him. "Would you like to try this medicine?" The pill was produced from the rare purple cloud mushroom and was extremely powerful. Consuming a single pill had the power to increase one's spiritual power tremendously. However, she was worried that Di Fui might be reluctant to consume it as he had refused her offer a few times before. Di Fui studied the pill briefly before graciously accepting it. The pill rolled onto his palm, reflecting light on its shiny surface with every turn. Its faint scent was certainly inviting. Di Fui was surprised to find that the scent of the pill somewhat reminded him of the scent of his soul. It was a familiar, distinctive kind of smell. "Did Huang Tu make these pills?" he asked. Gu Shijiu shook her head. "No, I was the one who made the pills. It was produced from a special type of herb found from the place where I am from." Di Fui said nothing more and stared at the pill fixedly. Gu Shijiu then said awkwardly, "If you are reluctant to take the pill, I can." Before Gu Shijiu took the pill back, Di Fui quickly popped it straight into his mouth. Gu Shijiu was astonished that he consumed it. She was now hopeful. "Sit properly. I shall transfer some spiritual power to help you absorb it better." The pill was immensely powerful, carrying a pure source of spiritual power. However, there was something deadly about the pill. It was incredibly difficult to absorb. The source of the spiritual power was so great that once it entered the body of the person who consumed it, it would cause a raging storm that filled every tiny stream instantaneously. One mistake could cost his life. After swallowing the pill, he needed to conceal the power in a bubble and absorb it bit by bit. The pill had to be digested very slowly, so he could slowly absorb its spiritual power. The process was much more complicated than the absorption of a spiritual stone. Usually, the complete absorption of the pill would take at least 6 days and 6 nights. It also required the receiver to meditate and transfer the energy throughout his or her body. It was guaranteed to increase the individual's spiritual power significantly, so the price was definitely worth the trouble. Gu Shijiu wanted to wait until they had more time to give him the pill, but desperate times called for desperate measures. It was a risk that she had to take. Di Fui's body had barely any spiritual power left, so he would not be able to use his own power to control and absorb the pill. Thus, Gu Shijiu stepped in to help. She knew exactly how the pill would react. Hence, she could certainly facilitate the absorption process. Gu Shijiu had briefly calculated the time needed to travel from the swamp to Ligua City. With the speed of the carriage, they would need at least a day. A day was all she needed to help him absorb the pill. Since Gu Shijiu offered to help, Di Fui would certainly not be opposed to it. He did as told and sat with his legs crossed in front of her. In sync, they pressed their palms together. Gu Shijiu was worried that she might hurt him, So she carefully transferred her spiritual power into his body and slowly traced his veins down to his stomach. She tried to locate the pill. Surprisingly, she could not find it. What had gone wrong? Gu Shijie continued to search his body, but still found nothing. Did you swallow it? I did. Is it stuck in your gullet? Of course not. What is the matter? Di Fui was surprised by the confused look on Gu Zijie's face. It is gone. Di Fui was stunned. Perhaps I have absorbed it on my own? Should it melt away as soon as it passes down my throat? When Di Fui swallowed the pill, he could feel a steady stream of heat slowly go down from his throat to his stomach. He could feel a brief sense of warmth in his stomach before the sensation disappeared entirely. It should be very difficult to digest. When I took the pill, I spent 3 days and 3 nights to absorb its power. Long Sai took even longer. He spent 8 days in total. Gu Shijie was very worried. She studied Di Fui's body carefully, as she was concerned that the immense power would crush his veins at any second. To her surprise, Di Fui looked completely normal. In fact, he looked slightly better than how he was before. How do you feel? Di Fui tried to sense the power in his body and shook his head. I don't feel different. Gu Shijie was even more worried now. Under normal circumstances, he should be able to feel the heat in his body within minutes of taking the pill. There should at least be sweat coming out of his face and body. Had the pill lost its effectiveness over time? Or was it on the brink of exploding inside his body? Once activated, it should take over his body like a raging storm. Gu Shijie was in a state of panic. She felt as though she had placed a bomb in his stomach that she could not even locate. She forced him to sit up straight, so that she could assess him carefully. Determined, she used her spiritual power and traced every inch of his body to find it. However, the result was the same, fruitless. The pill had disappeared entirely without a trace. Due to this discovery, Gu Shijie decided to stop the transfer of energy to his body, even though she was reluctant. Are you sure that you have swallowed it? She looked at him doubtfully and started to wonder if he was lying to her. Di Fui sighed as he pulled her into his arms. Why would I lie to you? You have to learn to trust me. It is quite abnormal for the pill to have completely disappeared without a trace. Gu Shijie was very confused. Perhaps, the pill has lost its effectiveness. To Di Fui's knowledge, it had been more than 200 years since the production of the pills. It could be the case that the pills had simply expired. Gu Shijie was somewhat dismayed by the revelation. It had been a while since she consumed the pill. However, her storage bag had the ability to keep things fresh. Normally, even food could be well preserved for at least 3 to 5 years in the bag. Why would the pills be any different? Was it because of her stay in the Shura world? There was a period where she lost her kung fu and no longer had access to her storage bag. Perhaps, it had lost its ability to keep her food and medicine fresh? Perplexed, Gu Shijie could not figure out why the pill did not work. Di Fui reached out to her and requested, "Give me another one. This time, I will taste it before swallowing it." Gu Shijie was surprised by his eagerness. Did he really think that the pill was some sort of ginseng herb that could be consumed repeatedly? No way. You can only consume one pill at a time. It cannot be overconsumed. Otherwise, its power will crush your veins. The previous one was obviously ineffective. I cannot feel anything at all, so the pill did not work. Maybe the others are still good? We should at least try. Gu Shijie agreed, but was still curious why the previous pill proved ineffective. She waited for an hour to observe him, and could not see any change in his body. She examined his pulse and was sure that he was still doing the same as before. Finally, she agreed to give him another pill. This time, she took the best pill she could find. The pill looked excellent, round as a pearl and smooth as jade. It was gleaming with polish. She took a sniff of the pill, and was able to recognize the faint scent around it. She was convinced that it would work this time. She watched Di Fui intently as he swallowed the pill. She could even see the pill move down his Adam's apple as soon as he swallowed the pill. Di Fui could not hide his amusement. "Baby, I do not feel very comfortable under your intense gaze." "How do you feel?" Gu Shijie was too worried to entertain him. Difui noticed some differences this time. My stomach feels quite warm. This was how it should be. It seemed like the last pill was really ineffective, and that this one was going to work just fine. Without wasting any time, Gu Shijiu quickly pressed her palms against his and transferred some spiritual power to him. She tried to locate the precious pill in his body. She could finally locate the pill this time but was quite shocked by the result. In that brief moment, the pill was almost entirely absorbed by his body. From the size of a fingernail, it was reduced to almost the size of a green bean, leaving only 1/3 of the pill left in his stomach. At this rate, it would soon be completely digested. As soon as Gu Shijiu came back to her senses, she tried to surround the pill in a bubble, but before she could form the protective layer, the pill was gone. Chapter 2434. The Source of the Spiritual Power. 3. Gu Shijiu was astonished. Were his gastric juices abnormally strong? How could the absorption be so swift? What kind of powerful feature did his body possess? If the pill was digested so quickly, the spiritual power of the pill should have been transferred to his body. It should be accumulated at the core of his body by now. Gu Shijiu carefully traced his veins. There was nothing wrong with his blood circulation. Additionally, everything in his system seemed smoothly regulated. However, she was disappointed as she could hardly feel any spiritual power in his body. It seemed that his body was a bottomless pit that managed to absorb the pill and its power along with it. The magical pill that worked wonders for her was obviously ineffective to him. Gu Shijiu stood in a daze, trying to comprehend the situation. Difui was equally confused. I have had one of these pills before, and it worked very well for me back then. Have they lost their effectiveness in the Shura world? Suddenly, he was reminded of a past incident. His mother once had a strange encounter where there was a bottomless pit in her body that would swallow all sources of spiritual power almost instantaneously, leaving her body with none. Finally, she found out that it was all because of a sinister being in her body. All of her spiritual power was drained to nourish the growth of the sinister being. Was the same sinister being in his body as well? The scary thought gave him a shudder. He tried to examine his body, but could not find anything odd. Gu Shijiu carefully read his pulse, and realized that his condition remained just the same. There was only a slight increase in his spiritual power, which was still very limited. The effect of the pill was even worse than the spiritual stone. Hence, perhaps the most logical explanation was that the pill had lost its power. Gu Shijiu was ready to give up. She kept the pills away, but was abruptly distracted by a sudden scream. "Watch out!" A man called out in a panic. "Ah! There are so many bloody bats. Quickly! Defend!" The chaos continued. Soon, the sound of a fierce battle could be heard. Gu Shijiu was utterly surprised by the presence of the bats. These bloody bats would usually come right before the blood rain. Was the rain going to pour any time soon? She flipped the curtain away, and the sight sent a shiver down her spine. A compact mass of bloody bats surrounded the top of the carriage. They spread themselves around the carriage, blotting out the sky and the sun. The notorious bats dived sharply from high altitudes towards the carriage, as if there was a precious treasure within it that was driving them crazy. There were already more than 70 of these bats approaching the carriage. Guardian Jean and Guardian Hua were fighting them off in a frenzy, killing the bats and turning them into pools of blood. However, there were undoubtedly too many for them to handle at once. Dozens of bloody bats finally found a way through, and were likely to collide with Gu Shijiu as soon as they approached. Gu Shijiu unsheathed her sword. With a few swings, these bats were dead. However, that was just the beginning. A compact mass awaited them in the sky. If they all launched themselves toward the carriage at once, it would certainly spell the end for carriage. The carriage was not a concern for Gu Shijiu. It was Difui that she was worried about. He barely had any strength left to defend himself. There was no way that he could fend off the bats. The rising sun was just about to shine its first faint streaks of dawn in the east, indicating the start of a new day. Chapter 2435. The Source of the Spiritual Power. 4. The presence of the bloody bats was certainly untimely. Was this all a trick by Yin Yanli? Gu Shijiu took a quick look at Yin Yanli's carriage and was further convinced. There were no bats above his carriage, and even Zhu Duking's carriage as well. The bats were only attacking her carriage. Irritated, she was sure that Yin Yanli must be playing a trick on them. Thoroughly annoyed by the situation, she gave her finger a bite to cast an incantation with her blood. A wizardry barrier was immediately formed, surrounding the carriage in a safety bubble. These bloody bats plunged toward the carriage as a loud buzz swept across the sky. Luckily, the wizardry barrier was strong enough to withstand the impact. The barrier shook a little but did not break. At the same time, Yin Yanli finally emerged from his carriage. He looked confused as if waking up from a dream. The drowsy look on his face faded as soon as he caught the scary sight. "Shijiu!" he called out in a panic. Swiftly he approached the carriage. He seemed eager to help. Zhu Duqing came to help too. He stood on the top of his donkey-led carriage, summoning countless green stalks to spread across the sky and stop the plunging bats from impacting on the wizardry barrier. Yin Yanli was very fast as well. He made it right through the wizardry barrier and landed on top of the carriage. Those clueless bats were drawn by the man's entry and followed closely. Gu Shijiu clenched her fists in frustration. The man did it on purpose. Gu Shijiu took a few swings to kill some of the attacking bats before rushing back into the carriage. Yin Yanli was caught by surprise from her sudden retreat, but did not enter with her. He continued to fight the bats. "Shijiu, don't worry. I will kill these bats for you," he reassured. He swung his sword quickly and accurately. Many tiny swords seemed to emerge on his blade, making his every attack more lethal. As his kung fu was powerful, the bats were afraid to get any closer. His blue robes fluttered gracefully in the breeze with his every move. It was a rather attractive sight. "Brother Yin, you have such powerful kung fu." He could hear a voice that was accompanied by applause. Surprised, he quickly looked to the source of the voice, only to see Gu Shijiu standing on top of his carriage instead of her own. She was smiling and cheering for him. Apparently, Gu Shijiu had teleported with Di Fui into Yin Yanli's carriage. Di Fui sat uncomfortably in the wagon and was looking at Yin Yanli with added interest. When their eyes met, Di Fui smiled at Yin Yanli and said, "Thank you, Mr. Yin." Yin Yanli was speechless. Meanwhile, the bats seemed to have lost interest in the carriage as soon as the two of them had moved out. After a long, fruitless struggle, the bats finally left, and the carriage was left unharmed. Fortunately, Guardians Jean and Hua were only slightly injured. The bloody bats were actually very poisonous. A bite or a scratch was already enough to cause them harm. Nonetheless, thanks to the long-lasting effect of the antitoxin in their bodies, they were both fine and only suffered some minor scratches. "Shijiu, are you all right?" Yin Yanli returned to his carriage and asked keenly. "I am fine, more traumatized than hurt." With a smile, Gu Shijiu continued. "These bats were obviously scared of you. They ran away as soon as you approached." It was evident from her tone that Gu Shijiu was very scornful. Hesitantly, Yin Yanli stared at her with a serious expression. "Shijiu, did you suspect that I was the one who summoned the bats?" Gu Shijiu denied his accusation. "I did not." It was true that she did not suspect that he had caused the commotion. She was sure that he did. However, she could not point that out. She could not risk shedding all the pretenses at this time. Yin Yanli turned his attention to Di Fui instead. Mr. D seemed at ease, even in such a dangerous moment. He did not see Di Fui helping Gu Shijiu earlier. Di Fui confidently flicked his sleeves. "You are right. If I helped, I would not be able to witness your charm." Yin Yanli did not know what to answer. Soon Di Fui and Gu Shijiu returned to their carriage. Their reason for doing so was that Mr. D was obsessed with hygiene. He had just cleaned the wagon, so he was reluctant to switch. What frustrated Yin Yanli the most was Gu Zijia's unquestioned submission towards Di Fui's every request. When he asked to return, she willingly agreed and followed him back to the carriage without questioning his intentions. Yin Yanli was very annoyed but did not dare to act at this moment. The incident was finally over, and all the carriages continued their journey. Yin Yanli looked at the carriage before him and was puzzled. He did not summon the bloody bats. They appeared on their own. However, he knew about the characteristics of the bat. These bats were able to tell when an immense source of spiritual power appeared. They were attracted to spiritual power like flies are attracted to garbage, and could easily track the source within miles. He once used the bats to find sources of spiritual power, and they never let him down. The stronger the spiritual power, the more bats one could expect to be present. The scary part was that he had never seen so many bats going after one source of spiritual power before. Obviously, Gushijou and Difui possessed a strong source of spiritual power. They must have revealed some of their spiritual power by accident, thus attracting the bloody bats. Finally, the bats left as soon as they kept away their spiritual power. What was the source of the spiritual power that they had? Difui was the son of a celestial being and a devil. The divine couple clearly adored him, so they must have given him a lot of magical items. One of the items he was carrying must be the source of the spiritual power. That would explain how Difui was able to show up again after his disappearance for so long. He even had the ability to destroy the entire poisonous swamp that had encountered a catastrophe. Perhaps he had passed through some adventures and acquired an immense source of spiritual power. Difui was known to be a man of wicked plans, torturing his enemies with no mercy. Yun Yanli thought that it was all a plot. Otherwise, Difui would not stand aside even when his life was at stake. He would not leave Gushijou alone in such a situation. He appeared to be a little weak as well. Was Difui presenting a bold front to conceal something? Or was he only acting to lure Yun Yanli into action? A sudden realization occurred to Yun Yanli, which made him believe that he had a grasp of the entire situation. Yun Yanli was convinced that Difui revealed Yun Yanli's intentions to Gushijou. But she refused to believe his theory, so he wanted to make Yun Yanli launch the first attack to prove that he was right. Difui had pretended to be weak on purpose and flirted with Gushijou sweetly just to tempt Yun Yanli. Everything was a show just to trigger him to attack. Yun Yanli was not a man who would fall for such a trap. With a smug look on his face, Yun Yanli decided to enter Zhu Duking's carriage. He wanted to see if he could get any information from the man. The carriage that Difui and Gushijou rode was not badly damaged. There were some stains on the curtains and some holes every here and there, but overall, it looked fine. Difui changed the curtains into new ones that were even better than what Yun Yanli had for them earlier. He changed a few other items and threw the old ones out. Yun Yanli's men were not on the same carriage, but they could clearly see him from behind. All of them frowned with dissatisfaction by his action. Difui, how could you? They were very unhappy with Difui's actions and found him too arrogant. He was too disrespectful to the governor, the men thought. Yun Yanli came out of his carriage and saw exactly what Difui was doing. However, he was not quite bothered. With a smile, he proceeded to Zhu Duking's carriage as planned. His smile clearly showed that he would not fall for his trap. Difui could annoy him as much as he wanted, but he was not going to give him the chance to convince Gushijou. Yun Yanli's men looked at one another in consternation. If the governor was unbothered, perhaps they should not care about it, too. Therefore, everyone pretended that they saw nothing. Gushijou looked at the carriage that had taken on an entirely new look. Difui had publicly removed every piece from Yun Yanli. It is not the time to trigger Yun Yanli. Are you sure that he will not be irritated by your little affectations? She was quite puzzled by Difui's intention. Difui let out a graceful smile as he explained confidently. Don't worry. The more I behave so, the more unlikely he will attack. He must be thinking that I am doing all this to irritate him and trigger him to act out of exasperation, thus revealing his true self in front of you. Gushijou said nothing more. She knew that Difui was indeed a man with a plan. More accurately speaking, he was a child with a plan. She observed him and was relieved to see that his complexion had slowly returned. It seemed like the purple cloud mushrooms were useful after all. She then proceeded to read his pulse and could immediately tell that there was a strong flow of spiritual power circulating in his body. Delighted, she quickly put him down on the cushion and examined the open wound on his chest. The wound was starting to heal, and everything seemed to be going right. It was indeed a great sign. Relieved, She looked up and caught Di Fui gazing at her. There was a complicated look in his eyes as he stayed still and well-behaved. "Why are you looking at me like that?" She then helped him put his robes back on properly. Di Fui pulled her close and lay her down on his body. "I thought you were going to do something dirty to me." "You have overthought." She decided to offer him the entire bottle of purple cloud mushroom pills. "I can see that your complexion is slowly returning, and that your wound is healing just fine, which proves that my pills are working. Would you like some more?" Di Fui planted a soft kiss on her forehead. "Do you have many of these pills?" He was perplexed by her generous offer. "Unfortunately, I don't. These pills are very precious. I have only encountered these purple cloud mushrooms once in my entire life, and collected them all. I tried to find these mushrooms again, but my efforts were in vain." She had offered him the entire bottle without any hesitation. "Are you giving all of the pills to me?" Yes, Gu Shizhou did not hesitate. She always felt that these pills belonged to him. Giving him the bottle was only a gesture of returning something that was always meant to be his. Her kind offer touched Di Fui. He took a careful look at the content of the bottle. There were about 50 or 60 pills left. Each pill was encircled in a glistening layer of purple light that made it look as though it was glowing. Di Fui took about half of the bottle and returned the rest to Gu Shizhou. "It will be a waste if I take them all. You should keep the rest. These pills will probably help you as well. When there is time, I will cover you while you slowly take these pills and meditate." Gu Shizhou thought about his proposition before accepting the bottle. All right. She knew that she needed to restore her spiritual power as well. These pills would surely work for her. When she had regained her memory, she had thought about consuming the pill to restore her power. However, there was hardly any time for her to rest and meditate. Di Fui proceeded to swallow a dozen pills at once. Like before, these pills melted away in his stomach almost instantaneously. But this time, Di Fui could finally feel the warm sensation in his veins. It was a rather pleasant feeling. The wound on his chest did not hurt quite as much after the pills had dissolved in his stomach. Meanwhile, a warm stream of energy circulated his entire body, making him feel as if he had soaked his body in a hot spring. There were finally some apparent signs that Di Fui's condition was improving. Nevertheless, Gu Shizhou saw him swallowing the pills yet still behaving as if nothing had happened. She was actually tempted to do the same. She took a pill and popped it into her mouth. She needed some water to help her swallow the pill, but as she searched for it, a man called out, "Oh no! There are so many bloody bats again. They have returned." Gu Shizhou was surprised. In fact, she choked on the pill. Unable to breathe, she started coughing violently. The pill was not a small one, so she could not cough it out so easily. Soon her face was red. Di Fui quickly gave her a tap on the back, followed by a tight squeeze from the back. Finally, she spat the pill out, and it went through the curtains. Gu Shizhou could finally catch her breath, and she kept away the bottle of pills in her storage bag again. It was a waste to let the pill fly out the window, so she wanted to try and get it back. However, what she saw next completely stunned her. There were thousands of bloody bats surrounding them in the air. They were initially drawn to the carriage, but they changed their course all of a sudden and plunged downward as if going after something important. Gu Shizhou was dizzy just watching them fly together. What was going on? Gu Shizhou threw the guardians a look and saw their equally perplexed faces. "The bats were coming after us just now." Guardian Hua heaved a long sigh of relief. "Anyway, I am glad that they are not going to attack us anymore." Guardian Jean agreed. "I thought the same. If they were really coming at us, we would not be able to stand a chance. Do you know what they are doing? It seems as though they are killing themselves." The bloody bats were fighting frantically against one another all of a sudden. They were not even bothered by the carriages anymore. Gu Shizhou was confused by the strange encounter. She stood there watching the bats for a while, but could not figure out what they were doing. She somehow thought that it must have something to do with the pill that slipped out of her mouth. She turned her head around and turned to Di Fui for an answer. He was standing right next to her, with his arms around her waist. He was looking in the same direction as if deep in thought. "What do you think the bloody bats are doing?" Gu Shijiu finally asked. When he was around, she would always count on him for an answer. Di Fui did not say anything. Instead, he pulled her into the carriage and carefully instructed her. Shijiu, these purple cloud mushroom pills should not be exposed anymore. The bats are actually drawn to the pills. We have wrongly faulted Yun Yanli for the earlier encounter with the bats. Gu Shijiu had the same doubt but was not entirely sure. How can you be sure? Di Fui explained. I have seen everything with my eyes. They were plunging towards the pill. One of the bats seized the chance and swallowed the pill first, but was not able to handle the overwhelming effect. The first bat exploded, shattering its flesh into tiny bits. Meanwhile, the rest of the bats were frantically going after its meat, which sparked the fight. Gu Shijiu was speechless. She never knew that the pills would actually attract the bloody bats. Perhaps, the pills were as precious as the meat of the Tang priest to them. Gu Shijiu and Di Fui were engaged in a discussion when Guardian Jin suddenly asked, "What is the matter, Governor Yun?" Apparently, Yun Yanli was on board the carriage. As expected, Yun Yanli spoke nonchalantly. "I have a few questions for your master." He raised the curtains and entered the carriage. "Shijiu, were you studying something? How did you manage to attract the huge mass of bloody bats? It is not a good sign. Take it out and let me have a look." Di Fui leaned against the table as he casually replied, "You're hilarious. Why should we show it to you? Shouldn't you be ashamed of your sudden intrusion?" Yun Yanli was speechless. He was not expecting Di Fui's brutal and straightforward reply. His expression clearly showed that he was a little offended. "Prince Nianma, we are on the same team now. We have to work together to ensure our safety. The attacks from the bloody bats are getting more frequent now. Obviously, they are coming after one of your magical items. For our safety, it is better if you to show it to me so that we can examine it together," he said in an icy tone. "How did you know they were coming after one of our magical items?" Di Fui added, "These bloody bats are attracted to powerful sources of spiritual power. They were clearly chasing after your carriage, so you must have been in possession of something valuable to them." Di Fui gave him a sharp look in the eyes as he said, "I did not know that these bats would go after spiritual power. Using this information in relation to the blood rain, are you suggesting that the bats will attack the cities because they have their own sources of spiritual power as well?" Yun Yanli's expression changed a little. He had obviously revealed a little too much information to Di Fui. Not many people knew about the characteristic of the bloody bats. Perhaps only him and Yin Qingluo. Even his closest follower knew nothing about the secret. It was rather unusual for him to have given away such a secret so carelessly. Was he being manipulated? Di Fui had the bloodline of the celestial beings and devils, so the kung fu that he possessed was a complicated mixture of both. He must have learned a method to manipulate his enemies into revealing their secrets. At least, that was what Yun Yanli believed. The man was very frustrated at that point. His fists were clenched tightly in his sleeves. Di Fui looked at him smilingly and said, "Mr. Yun seems to know quite a number of things. What are the other characteristics of the bloody bats? I hope you do not mind to share the information with us, Mr. Yin. As you said before, our safety is the priority, so perhaps with the information, we can discuss our strategies to fight them later." Yun Yanli could no longer hold back his irritation. "I asked my question first." Di Fui glanced at him as he continued. "Is it mandatory to answer your question first? Mr. Yun, as you said, we are on the same team now, so we should share everything we know and plan the next strike on our common enemy. Let us do it this way. You tell me about the secrets of the bloody bats, and I will share with you the magical item that attracted them. Although I will be the one who is giving up more than you, I am generous enough to share. I do not want to bother myself arguing with the likes of you." Yun Yanli clenched his fists repeatedly under his sleeves to vent her anger silently. He wanted to smash Di Fui's head right there and then. Overwhelmed, he put his fingers together to cast a spell, but an item that Di Fui held in his hands caught his attention. The man was holding a ring that was embellished with a gem that glistened with 7 colors. Di Fui was carving the gem with a finger. It used to be in the form of a hemisphere, but was now carved into the shape of a rose using his nail. Every intricate detail of the petals was almost lifelike. Yin Yanli could recognize the material with a single glance. It was the toughest diamond that was ever discovered in the world. Yet Di Fui was carving the diamond with his hand. Yin Yanli knew very well that he was not capable of doing the same. Therefore, he decided to hold back on the spell. The lack of patience in small matters would always upset great plans. He was not sure that he could kill Di Fui, so he should not act recklessly. There were still many opportunities ahead of them. In fact, Yin Yanli was going to host a grand dinner in the city to plot against his enemy. However, those were only his thoughts for the time being. He let out a smile to conceal his murderous thought. As far as I am concerned, these bloody bats are fond of blood and are very poisonous. They like to go after the powerful sources of spiritual power. The place where they gather is where the source of spiritual power lies. Does every city have a powerful source of spiritual power? Gu Shijiu asked. Yin Yanli was more polite when he talked with Gu Shijiu. It was evident from his reply. It is indeed so. Shijiu, the spiritual stones that we have collected from the various hunting exercises are the source that attracts the bats. The spiritual stones are the key to support the entire wizardry barrier that shelters the city. Shijiu suddenly recalled the spiritual stones that she had stolen from Sueya City, and nodded silently. She knew that Yin Yanli was not lying. However, there was still one question in her mind. If there are spiritual stones in the city, why don't the bloody bats attack every day? Why are they only coming once every 10 days? Is it a cycle for the spiritual stones to be exposed every 10 days? Are the stones otherwise sheltered by some wizardry barrier, which prevents the bats from sensing their presence? Gu Zijia's questions were on point, and Yin Yanli could only let out a sigh after some thought. It is more or less so. I cannot tell you more about it. Shijiu, it is not that I do not trust you. This is the secret that every city bears. As a governor, I have vowed to keep the secret. I am sorry. Gu Shijiu merely smiled at him after hearing his response. She wanted to see how long he could keep on pretending. She knew that he would personally appoint the governor of every city. Therefore, he must have dismissed the governor that he had appointed to take his position. But why would he trouble himself if everything was under control? Unfortunately, Gu Shijiu was not able to extract much information from him. She would have to do her own research and find out more on her own. All right, I have told you everything that I can. Shijiu, shouldn't you hold your end of the deal and show me the source of your spiritual power? Yin Yanli had not forgotten about their arrangement. In fact, Yin Yanli had not found out the identity of the culprit who stole his spiritual stones. He was somewhat convinced that Di Fui could be the thief. After all, the bloody bats would only attack if there were a large number of spiritual stones in the same area. Di Fui looked into his storage bag and took out a claw. He explained, "It is nothing much really. We were having a meal. All that is left is this claw." The claw was the size of a little finger, so it was hard to tell what animal it came from. Yin Yanli was annoyed. "Prince Nianma, are you trying to fool me? What kind of bird can provide such an immense source of spiritual power?" "The blue phoenix," Di Fui answered nonchalantly. Yin Yanli was speechless. He had never seen blue phoenix, but he had heard about it. He knew that it was one of the mythological beasts, but never knew that it was actually edible. Mythological beasts naturally possess great spiritual power, but he was not sure if the claw really belonged to a mythological beast. Yin Yanli took the claw and tried to sniff it. He could already sense an extraordinary source of spiritual power in that brief moment. He was curious. "Where did you get it from?" Di Fui had a sip of tea before answering. "This is your second question. Now, what have you prepared in exchange for the information?" Yin Yanli did not know what to say. At least he knew the source of the spiritual power was not the spiritual stones. He decided to end the conversation and leave resentfully. Meanwhile, Gu Shijiu was still studying the claw in the carriage. "Is this really the claw of the blue phoenix?" Di Fui nodded. He then took the claw and shattered it into pieces. He noticed that Gu Shijiu had a confused look on her face. It is dirty, he explained. Gu Shijio shook her head in disapproval. Even a feather from this creature would be considered precious, let alone its claw that still bears spiritual power. It is a waste. Di Fui took out the remaining half he had of the creature and said, "There is more." Gu Shijio was delighted. "You should keep this for yourself. You are still weak. This will come in handy for your recovery." "You are complaining about me being weak," he teased smilingly. His smile had distracted Gu Shijio slightly, so she decided to change the topic. "You are doing quite well, aren't you? I saw that you were carving a diamond with your hand earlier." Di Fui pondered for a moment, before putting the diamond on her palm. "You can do the same," he said. Gu Shijio examined the diamond, but could not find anything special about it. She then started to move her finger on the diamond, but could barely leave any mark on it. Perplexed, she looked at him for guidance. Di Fui gave her a delightful smile before applying a layer of cream on the diamond. After a while, he gave it back to her. "Try again." Gu Shijio tried again, and managed to carve the diamond into the shape of a flower. Startled, she asked, "What cream did you apply? How does it soften the diamond?" "It is not actually a diamond, but a look-alike. Without the cream, it looks no different from a diamond. Once applied, the cream will completely unmask its true property," he continued. "I wanted to show it to you for fun. Never knew that it would get us out of a problem." They continued their conversation while indulging in the meat of the blue phoenix. Gu Shijio insisted that Di Fui should have a more substantial portion of it, so he did. After that, Di Fui asked Gu Shijio to meditate, as he finally had the time to look after her. However, Gu Shijio thought that Di Fui should be the one to mediate first. He was, after all, the one with the injury. Di Fui had the meat before, and it did not trigger any reaction, so he did not see the need to meditate. However, he felt different this time. His body was boiling, and there was an apparent rush in his blood circulation. This was how a normal body would react upon consuming the meat of a mythological beast. The lack of reaction he had before must be due to the strong foundation of his spiritual power. The meat could hardly trigger any reaction because his spiritual power was already greater than what the bird had to offer. Now that his spiritual power had been greatly depleted, he could finally feel the power of the bird. Di Fui made some calculations and noticed that the meat would eventually increase his spiritual power by 1/10, which was quite remarkable progress. He took a look at Gu Shijio and noticed her crimson face. She needed to meditate. Without wasting any time, he pulled her closer and sat her down. "Listen to me, you should start first. I can meditate after you have fully absorbed the energy." Gu Shijio could not argue with him, so she did as told. The transfer of energy would take at most an hour. If the purple cloud mushroom could not trigger any reaction for Di Fui, then the half of the bird should be nothing to him. Moreover, he was the one who had the bird, so he should know the effects better than her. He was confident that he would be fine. Therefore, Gu Shijio proceeded to meditate. She did not meditate for long, however. About 20 minutes later, a sense of danger took over her mind. She started to panic as if something dangerous was about to unfold. Abruptly, she opened her eyes and realized that there was another man in the carriage. The man was not facing her, but she could immediately recognize him just by looking at his back. It was Yin Yanli. His palm was flashing with streaks of white light that were as sharp as a blade. He was about to give Di Fui a head-on strike. Di Fui was sitting there helplessly. His veins seemed to be visible all over his body while his face was completely drenched in sweat. He locked his eyes on Yin Yanli, but could barely say anything. Before Yin Yanli could deal him a blow, Gu Shijio quickly interrupted. "What are you doing?" Yin Yanli froze and slowly turned his head around to face her. "Shijio, you are awake," he said with a tight smile. His smile could not hide the murderous look in his eyes. It was appalling. Gu Shijio acted as if she did not notice anything. She returned the smile and said, "Yes, I have finally absorbed all of the power from the meat. What are you doing here in our carriage? And what is wrong with Di Fui?" Yin Yanli paused before answering her concern. He must have gone overboard in his meditation. I noticed that something was not right, so I came to check it out. I was about to help him just before you woke up. Oh, I see. Gu Shijiu answered without challenging him. She gave Yun Yanli a nod before approaching Di Fui to examine his pulse. There was an overflow of spiritual power in his body, like an unstoppable force that took over by storm. His vital signs indicated that he would be experiencing a significant change. He was obviously in pain, but he tried hard not to show it. Nonetheless, his physical state had revealed everything to Yun Yanli. His entire robe was soaked. Gu Shijiu started to panic. She suspected that the purple cloud mushrooms must be the root cause. Perhaps he was experiencing a delayed reaction. How is he doing? Yun Yanli asked, seemingly concerned. He is fine. He must have been too obsessed with his training. What he needs is a little recuperation. Mr. Yun, would you please leave us? I need to help him recover. Gu Shijiu tried to stay calm, so that Yun Yanli would not know the extent of the matter. However, Yun Yanli was not a man who could be easily persuaded. The look in his eyes had clearly shown his lack of trust in what Gu Shijiu had told him, so he decided to sit right across Di Fui. Shijiu, I am very good at the healing injuries in muscles and veins. Let me help him. He then reached out to grab Di Fui's wrist. Yun Yanli possessed a good level of medical knowledge, so he wanted to find out what was wrong with Di Fui himself. However, before Yun Yanli could even reach Di Fui's hand, he was immediately pushed away by a seven-colored ray. The force was so great that anyone with insufficient spiritual power would have been swept out of the carriage. As for Yun Yanli, he could not help but tremble a little under the force. He felt as if his palm had been electrified. A tingling sensation still lingered in his hand even though the light had dissipated. Utterly irritated, he exclaimed, "What are you doing? I was just trying to help." Di Fui's face was still as pale as a sheet. There were droplets of sweat all over his forehead. However, his expression remained stern as he sat with his legs crossed like a Buddha's statue. He looked away and said unrelentingly, "Get out." "Mr. Yun, I would suggest that you leave," Gu Shijiu chimed in. Yun Yanli noticed their inhospitable nature, so he agreed. "All right, I will be outside. Call me if you need me." He then pushed the curtains aside and left the carriage. As soon as he walked out, Di Fui collapsed straight into Gu Zijia's arms. Gu Shijiu held him up and realized that his hands were freezing yet sweaty. "Let's leave this place." Gu Shijiu could not play this game of charades any longer. It was too much of a risk due to Di Fui's condition. "No, not now," Di Fui exclaimed. Yun Yanli must have set up a wizardry barrier that can prevent you from teleporting. If they tried to escape from the carriage, Yun Yanli would definitely be alarmed. He had his men all over the place and was personally very skilled in kung fu. They would not be able to run far before getting caught. The situation would be worse by then. Gu Shijiu heaved a helpless sigh. "What should we do?" She then quickly took his wrist and said, "Let me help you." "It is too late." Di Fui's breaths hastened. Given his vast medical knowledge, he knew very well that his conditions would not get any better in a short period of time. Instead of getting her to treat him, he passed her a flute. "Do you know how to play the song, The 9 Songs in the Sky?" The 9 Songs in the Sky was one of the modern songs with a traditional composition that she had heard about before. She was familiar with the tune. "Yes," she replied with a firm nod. Di Fui was relieved. "If you play the tune outside, help will come to us." She did not know that he had another way of escaping. She was somewhat relieved to learn that he had something planned. Di Fui proceeded to swallow another pill. "What are you doing?" Gu Shijiu quickly asked. "This pill will help to calm the blood in my veins." Gu Shijiu never knew that such a pill existed. She was certainly very concerned as this was her first time to have come across the pill. "Is there any side effect?" "The pill will only temporarily suppress all of the symptoms for an hour. When the symptoms returned an hour later, his condition would undoubtedly worsen." But Di Fui decided to keep the truth from her. If there were any other way, Di Fui would choose not to take the pill. In the long run, it would do more harm than good to his body, but it was the only choice he could make right now. Yun Yanli had become suspicious. and Di Fui believed that he would attack any time soon. Gu Shijie walked to the outside and saw Yun Yanli right outside her cabin. He stood tall with his hands behind him. His eyes were locked on the horizon, seemingly at ease, but Gu Shijie could still feel his aura that spelled Di Fui's death. He turned around as soon as he heard some movement, and was astonished. "Are you done treating him? That was fast." Gu Shijie nodded as she put the flute into her mouth. "Let me have a look at him." Yun Yanli turned around and was ready to enter. Gu Shijie pointed the flute at his chest to stop him. "That is unnecessary. What he needs is a quiet rest." He asked for no disturbance. Yun Yanli could tell how serious she was at that moment. He smiled. "All right, as you wish." His attention was then drawn to the flute in her hand. "Do you know how to play the flute?" "A bit." Gu Shijie then tried to test the sound of the flute. "If it were not for Mr. Fui, I would have asked you to play a song." "It is fine. The sound of the flute is rather calming. A nice song can help him focus even better." Gu Shijie then put the flute in position, and was ready to play. "Wait." Yun Yanli stretched out his hand in an attempt to put away her flute. Quickly, Gu Shijie took a step back to avoid his hand. "What is the matter?" Smilingly, Yun Yanli offered her another flute. "The flute is produced from the bamboo garden of Xiang Concubine. It would certainly produce a more melodious tune than the one in your hand." Gu Shijie did not take it. "Are you saying that my flute is not good enough?" she asked with a tight smile. Yun Yanli chuckled as he answered casually. "That is not what I meant. I appreciate the celestial beauty in all the songs that you are going to play. A normal flute, however, will not do your talent justice." Gu Shijie giggled. She studied the flute in her hand and agreed that it certainly did not look spectacular. The flute was made from a regular bamboo trunk, and even had a small lump on it. However, since Di Fui had requested her to play that particular flute, it must mean something. Hence, she would not accept any proposal to change the flute. "I prefer a flute that preserves more originality in its creation." She kindly rejected his offer. She turned the flute around but did not hold it firmly. All of a sudden, it slipped and started to fall. Yun Yanli quickly reached out to grab the falling flute in time. "You have to be more careful," Yun Yanli complained. Swiftly, he examined the flute thoroughly and found nothing abnormal about it. He was finally relieved and returned the flute to her. "Shijie, what song would you like to play? Perhaps I can join in." Gu Shijie wiped the flute and said, "The 9 Songs in the Sky." Yun Yanli paused. He had never heard of that song before. "All right, you go on then. I shall be your audience for this song." Deep down, Gu Shijie wanted to sneer at him. Also, she knew that he did not have a clue about what she was up to since there was nothing odd about the flute, at least by the looks of it. She, too, had examined it before coming out of the cabin. Chapter 2444. The Strongest Backup 3. She had dropped the flute on purpose earlier, so that Yun Yanli had the chance to observe the flute and lower his guard. Upon playing the flute, the melodious tune filled the air. Gu Shijie was a talented musician. She could sing very well, and play an array of instruments. Although she could not play the flute as well as Di Fui, it was still very pleasing to hear. Yun Yanli could not keep his intense gaze away from her. She looked extremely beautiful with her long hair dancing in the breeze. It was such a surreal sight that Yun Yanli could not believe his eyes. A sudden, painful realization came to Yun Yanli. He had fallen for her. In fact, he wanted her very badly. Although she had a very low profile, she always stood out wherever she went. Furthermore, her kung fu was so powerful that no one could disrespect her. He thought that he was the perfect match for her when he was still a prince back in heaven, so he decided to stay by her side and fulfill her every wish. Secretly, he hoped that his actions would touch her heart one day. It was completely beyond his expectation that his world would change so radically. He had lost his status and even become a wanted man. However, Gu Shijie seemed to still enjoy his company and even saved his life. He clearly liked her very much, but the feeling was never mutual. Although Yun Yanli could be very evil, he would never do anything to hurt Gu Shijie. Although women were known to do illogical things when they were in love, Yin Yanli was just the same. Whenever Gu Shijie was around, he was always tensed. He would have to try to mask his anxiety from her, and always found himself struggling to impress her. He was certain that the only way he could keep her around was by force. Due to Di Fui's current condition, perhaps today was the best shot that he had to kill the mighty being. He knew what he needed to do, but as soon as she approached him, he immediately lost all courage and became overcautious about his decision. He could not believe that Gu Shijie would prefer a child over him. She used to be obsessed with a dead man. Now she had obviously changed her mind, and shared her affection with another man. Many thoughts bombarded his uneasy mind that kept fueling his fury. His fists were ready to fight, but he still could not find the courage. The song had finally come to an end, but the enchanting notes were still lingering in the air. That was a great one, Yin Yanli exclaimed with a tone of admiration. Then he immediately changed the topic. Shijie, aren't you going to look for Huang Tu anymore? There was no doubt in her mind that she should not tell him that Di Fui was actually Huang Tuesday. Hence, she gave a rather equivocal reply. I shall pursue that search again if fate brings me back on that path. In fact, Di Fui and Huang Tu were one and the same. The main difference was their memories. She had forgotten about the past, too. So his lack of memory about their past did not make any difference to her. She was in love with the man, and that was enough. Yin Yanli was smart, but he grasped a different meaning from Gu Zijie's intended message. He thought that she had already found herself a new sweetheart. So Huang Tu no longer meant anything to her. Oh, I see. Shijie, I did not know that you would fall in love with someone else. His fingers then moved in a planned motion, and were ready to cast a spell. He was finally determined to launch his first strike, and would do so when Gu Shijie was least prepared. All of a sudden, a voice came from afar. Nianma, are you there? Shocked, Yin Yanli immediately looked up and was perplexed. Chapter 2445. The Strongest Backup 4. A man in a snowsuit approached them from a distance. He looked tall and graceful, with a mask that covered his entire face. Only his enchanting eyes were noticeable. He stood on the back of a majestic horse that had its wings extended in the sky. The man's white robes fluttered in the wind, almost blending in with the mass of white clouds behind him. There was a wheel-like, lotus-throne embroidery shining brilliantly with auspicious streaks of light on his robes. Naturally, he possessed an aura only a god would be able to obtain. He was the Divine Lord. Although his face was covered, his signature white robes had already revealed his identity. Many people chose to dress in white, but the white robes that Shun Jiuli possessed could not be easily replicated. The robes were made from the best quality silk found only in heaven. The hidden embroidery of the Lotus Throne was a secret mastery. No embroider in the mortal world could ever reproduce the same masterpiece. Yin Yanli had only seen the Divine Lord once from afar back in heaven, but the mighty man had certainly made quite an impression on him. Therefore, Yin Yanli was able to tell who he was as soon as the man approached. Panicked, he gasped in astonishment. The man and his wife were the ones responsible for the fall of his family, so what Yin Yanli felt for the man was an absolute resentment. However, he still trembled at the sight of the Divine Lord. The man was the leading figure of all the three worlds. His power was unfathomable. Although the Divine Lord had clearly toned down lately, Yin Yanli was still intimidated by him. He dared not act recklessly anymore. The Divine Lord had never truly cared about anyone else, except for his family. He took a look at the flute in Gu Zijie's hand and was impressed. Were you the one who played the flute? His icy tone lingered in the air. Gu Shijie cupped her hands submissively and said, Yes, it was I. The Divine Lord took another look at the flute again. Where is Nianma? Obviously, he could recognize the flute. Gu Shijie knew that the sole intention of the song was to call for help. What she could not figure out was who could possibly intimidate Yin Yanli. She was just as startled as she did not expect the mighty man to show up. Before she could say anything, she noticed that the curtains behind her were flipped. Di Fui walked out bowed. Father, I did not expect to see you here in the Shuro world. As soon as Shun Jiuli saw his son, the icy atmosphere was quickly replaced by a hint of warmth. I am here to see you. You do not look like you have done very well here, he softly said. The man seemed to rejoice in his son's discomfiture. It was how they usually interacted. Difui rubbed his forehead in embarrassment. Father. Xinjuli turned his eyes to Yun Yanli and said nothing. The stern look was enough to make Yun Yanli's flesh crawl. No matter how much Yun Yanli hated the man, it was not the right time to show his resentment. Pleasure to see you, my lord, he bowed. All of his men proceeded to bow as well. Xinjuli only nodded at them. He then turned his attention back to Difui. Nianma, you do not look very well. Come with me. Let's get you back to the pink of health. Xinjuli was not a keen talker. He did not even bother to exchange courtesies with people. He raised his hand and summoned a carriage that was furnished with an elegant palette of blue. The carriage looked simple from afar, but the details were very elegant. The graceful and stylish appearance clearly suited a powerful man like Xinjuli. Obviously, he was going to take his son with him. Difui naturally would not object to his father's invitation. He offered Gu Shijio his hand and said, Shijio, let us go. Chapter 2446. The Strongest Backup 5. It was a rather cloudy day. From a distance, the setting sun was already at the edge of the horizon. The carriage swept through the clouds, along with two of Difui's men. Yun Yanli was still kneeling in front of his carriage, and watched helplessly as the carriage went into the distance. There was not a word that he could say to stop the carriage. It was a golden chance that he had unfortunately missed. His indecisive manner had cost him dearly this time. Everything that happened was not part of Yun Yanli's plan. He was still stunned by what had happened, and was not able to calm his mind. He knew that Xinjuli was once in the Shura world many years ago. But what was the man doing here now? He started to panic as he believed that the Divine Lord would soon find out about all the mess that he had caused in the Shura world. All of his work over the past centuries could be ruined at once. His palms were cold and sweaty, as he clenched his fists tightly in frustration. Why did you stop? Zhu Duqing had yet to realize what happened. He came out from his carriage, seemingly half asleep. He looked at the sky in utter confusion and asked, How far are we from Legua City? The sun is about to set. Yun Yanli looked annoyed at him. He was not quite fond of Mr. Zhu apparently. He initiated some small talk with Mr. Zhu in hopes of getting some information out of the man, but Mr. Zhu quietly disregarded his presence. Stupid. Yun Yanli was certainly irritated. They have just left. Do you still want to come with me to Legua City? Yun Yanli was starting to get impolite with his guest. Zhu Duqing was not expecting the answer he received. What? Have they left? When did that happen? Why didn't anyone tell me about it? He sounded like a puppy who had just been abandoned. Yun Yanli obviously took joy in his misfortune. Why should they tell you? Who are you to them? He teased. Zhu Duqing casually fanned himself as he added, Shijio is my master. It is the closest that anyone can get to her. They did not take me when they left, but they took Guardian Jin and Guardian Hua with them. They must be out of their minds. This is unacceptable. Who took them away? Why did they leave so suddenly? Didn't you say that you were inviting us to Legua City? Why did you let them go so suddenly? He bombarded Yun Yanli with a series of questions, but Yun Yanli only managed to get the last few questions, and answered him with a tone of sarcasm. Mr. Fuya's father was here, and took them away. Do you think I could stop them? He could not even make a sound. Astonished, Zhu Duqing finally stopped playing with his fan. His father? The Divine Lord came with his wife? Yun Yanli gave him a sibilant sound of disapproval. Only the Divine Lord came. His wife was not here. Zhu Duqing was curious. That is strange. They are always together. Why did they come separately this time? Yun Yanli was shocked too. He knew that the Divine Lord would never be away from his wife, so he too was surprised by his wife's absence. Perhaps his wife is occupied. They can certainly be apart, occasionally. Yun Yanli murmured in uncertainty. Zhu Duqing did not comment any further. He gave the donkey a tap on the buttock and said, Let's go. The donkey, as always, disapproved of the gesture. It whipped its tail at Zhu Duqing's face before launching itself into the distance at full speed. Yin Yanli was speechless. Master, are you going to let him go just like that? One of his men did not feel that it was a wise decision. Yin Yanli was a little distracted. What can he do for me if I make him stay? He is the man who can produce the devil-quenching clothing. Master, didn't you plan on getting him on board as one of us? Your plan to conquer the Devil Kingdom relies greatly on him. Yin Yanli finally recovered from his preoccupation. Indeed, he had always wanted to convince Mr. Zhu to join him, but the man had barely even left the Devil Kingdom. Also, it was not always easy to find him, as he was clearly a very sneaky man. It was probably even more difficult to convince him to make the devil-quenching clothing. How could Yin Yanli forget such an important thing? Go after him at full speed. Get him back for me. On second thought, I shall go after him myself. Yin Yanli leaped forward at full speed. Out of the entire continent in the Shuro world, perhaps, it was only the Devil Kingdom that was blessed with many inhabitants. Once it was conquered, he could place another array formation there to absorb the spiritual power for himself. Only then could his kung fu be greatly improved to be on a par with Shen Jiuli and his wife. Therefore, the devil-quenching clothing was essential to conquering the Devil Kingdom, without which he would have no chance. If Yin Yanli were to enter the Devil Kingdom without the appropriate attire, he would probably be able to survive for some time. Nonetheless, as for his people, as soon as they stepped into the land, they would immediately turn into piles of ash. Determined, Yin Yanli used all of his strength to go after Zhu Duqing, who had just left the place 2 minutes ago. He was possibly traveling faster than the speed of light. Coupled with his good tracking skills, Yin Yanli believed that he would be able to find him in less than a minute. To his disappointment, the man was nowhere to be found. In that brief moment, Zhu Duqing had already disappeared, along with his visible donkey carriage. Yin Yanli could not believe it. The carriage was only led by a donkey with an attitude problem. Even a dragon would not be able to travel so fast. It was as if the man had disappeared into thin air. Frustrated, Yin Yanli could not help but clench his fists. Had Mr. Zhu figured out that Yin Yanli would be going after him? Had he escaped through a portal? Zhu Duqing was indeed a cunning man, Yin Yanli thought to himself. Nonetheless, he clearly recalled that Mr. Zhu was too weak to be able to open the portal. He even refused Gu Zijia's request to open it, and would rather take the carriage with the donkey. How did he become so powerful all of a sudden? Was he only pretending to be weak? Furthermore, Yin Yanli had not expected a man like Zhu Duqing to acknowledge Gu Shijiu as his master. It was certainly confusing. Just at that moment, another question arose. Zhu Duqing had spent many years in the Devil Kingdom without making any appearances outside. Now that he had acknowledged Gu Shijiu as his master, that would mean that Gu Shijiu had stepped foot into the Devil Kingdom before, and made her first encounter with Zhu Duqing. Gu Shijiu would not be able to make it into the Devil Kingdom without the devil-quenching clothing. The sudden realization left him dumbstruck. He suddenly remembered the theft in Governor Ye's residence. Other than the spiritual stones, a rare set of devil-quenching clothing went missing as well. Could she be the thief? Was the thief not someone from the Devil Kingdom? Yin Yanli's suspicion grew stronger, but he also found it hard to believe. If she really were the one who conducted the theft, she must have found out about his plan. Was she only acting in front of him? Was she worried that he might harm her? Utterly shocked, he continued to connect the dots. He then thought about the two guardians, Jin and Hua. These names sounded quite familiar to him. He finally recalled. The new Devil King had two courtiers, who also shared the same surnames, Jin and Hua. Had Di Fui become the new Devil King during the time he had disappeared? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.